Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. My favorite person in the world wasn't actually a person. She wasn't even close. When I was younger, I had this friend named Bats. I met her at a janky little carnival that was only in town for one weekend. At the time, I'd been in the police academy for 2 weeks, and another cadet had taken me there on a date. There was nothing wrong with the guy, especially compared to my last boyfriend, but it felt wrong. As the date stretched on and night fell, I realized I didn't want to be there with him. I didn't want to be there at all. I wasn't ready. Not for the date, or the way he kept leaning in, and definitely not for the way he kept looking at me. And that's because of Jason. Jason was my last boyfriend. One night, about 2 years prior to that evening at the janky carnival, we went to bed. In the morning, I woke up. Jason didn't. He was a side sleeper. When he died, that side of his face folded into rills, almost like a curtain rolling upward. It froze that way. That was bad. The emptiness of him was worse. Under the best of circumstances, there's this quality, a hollow, asymmetrical slackness that's unique to death. The morning I woke up, and he didn't, that's how he looked. Hollow, asymmetrical, and slack. That's how I remember him, no matter how hard I try to change it. So fast forward a few years to that rundown carnival. As night fell, I started losing it. By the time the stars came out, I couldn't look at my date without seeing his face as though he were dead. Slack and hollow, with cold skin reeled up like a curtain call. He didn't notice because he was fixated on a game booth. Among the array of prizes was this gigantic stuffed dragon that he was hell-bent on winning for me. I should have been flattered. I should have been having fun. But I couldn't have fun, not with the way his face kept going slack, not with the way his eyes kept clouding up, not with the way the side of his face kept rolling up like a flesh curtain. Watching him play this shitty carnival game for that shitty stuffed animal under the blazing lights was too much. Too much light, too much noise, too much greasy funnel cake smell coated my throat every time I breathed in too much him, and far, far too much me. Just as he finally won that stuffed dragon, I started crying. It was the worst kind of crying, too. The kind where tears come before you even know you're sad. And even though it makes no sense, I panicked. I didn't want him to see me cry. Couldn't stand for him to see. That was the only thought in my head. I can't let him see. So I spun around as tears fell, and the lights broke open and flooded the world the way things do when you cry, and stumbled away. Of course, he came after me. Why wouldn't he? I started running. 3 seconds later, I collided with someone so hard, I actually ricocheted a little, and I burst into tears. The next thing I knew, the lady I'd run into was holding me tight, and telling my poor date to fuck off before she called the cops. "I am the cops," he said. That made me laugh, but I was crying so hard it sounded like a sob. That sent my savior into overdrive. Every cop-related slur on this earth erupted out of her, so loud she drew a crowd. Or maybe the funnel cake stand was drawing the crowd with its sticky, sweet grease smell, and she was just the entertainment. She screamed until my date finally left. It was impressive. It was also embarrassing when, about 2 minutes later, I felt the need to tearfully confess that I was also a cop. She patted my back, bracelets jangling as they caught the lights. All cops are bastards, including you. But bastards need friends too, especially little ones who still have time to grow and shed their bastard skins. "What?" I asked nervously. She pinched the sleeve of my jacket and pulled upward. Her face lit up so brightly that I was sure she was mocking me. "Look, your bastardness isn't even a skin yet. It's still a coat, which means there's plenty of time to fix you. I bet the mirror would prove it." "What mirror?" "The Mirror is my favorite place in the world, which is a shitty little nightclub. It and the Mirror are magic. It shows you who you really are on the inside. Want to come see? No. Good. Because you're not ready. And when you're not ready, the mirror drives you insane. I've seen it. We gotta fix you first. So let's get fixing. And that's how I met bats. So as a kid, I always felt like I'd been born with a moat around me. In my mind's eye, this moat was huge and deep, full of jagged rocks waiting to kill you if you tried to dive, and circling sharks ready to eat you if you tried to swim. It felt like the water was lapping closer every day, threatening to wash the ground out from under my feet, and carry me out to the sharks and the rocks. I felt like I either had to wait to drown, or take a running leap and pray I'd jump high enough to clear the moat and reach the solid ground on the other side. And I did exactly that, but barely. In my imagination, I was pinwheeling for balance on the edge of the moat while soft ground crumbled under my feet, threatening to spill me into the water. I still feel like I'm pinwheeling. Anyway, I think bats have been born with that same moat, but she didn't try to jump across. Somehow she just danced on the water, dodging rocks and sharks like it was nothing. I don't even know what I'm trying to express here, except to say that Bats was everything I wanted to be, which is everything I'll never be. Bats was lanky and somehow withered even though she wasn't much older than me. She had dark hair and eyes that were almost yellow. In low light, they were bright as molten gold. She wore stacks of antique bracelets and billowing bright scarves that contrasted with her clothes, which were mostly black and generally outrageous. Her voice carried a telltale rasp of someone who's played a little too often with substances, and her laugh was grating but wonderful. She worked the dish pit at a chain restaurant and lived 2 blocks from me. Her apartment was a cluttered riot of color and light. She hated lamps, so string lights in every shape and color crisscrossed the ceiling, and the walls like giant spiderwebs. Her place wasn't just cluttered with light and junk. It was cluttered with people, too. Young, old, wealthy, homeless, whole, broken. People of every kind, whose only commonality was that they belonged to Bats somehow. I became one of them. When Bats decided you were hers, she never let you go. Some people love you by putting you at peace. Others love you by breaking you open. Bats broke me open. She was the first person to notice I had an eating disorder. She didn't shame me for it, or romanticize, or fetishize it, either. What she did was ask what my favorite cookies were. Oatmeal, I said. Fucking gross, she answered. Instead of oatmeal cookies, she baked a giant batch of her favorite, double chocolate chili cookies, and made me eat. It worked. It shouldn't have. It wouldn't have if Bats hadn't made them, but she did, so it worked. Don't get me wrong. Bats was far from perfect. People who collect human problems always have problems of their own. Bats was no exception. One of the ways her problems manifested was by treating some of the people she broke open like they were pets. She treated me like a pet she wanted to train. It's probably not a surprise, but her training methods were weird as hell. Most of them focused on what she called my bastard coat. Bastard coats are the outsides we put on to disguise our insides, she told me. But the problem with bastard coats is they eventually replace your insides. We have to teach you how to shed your bastard coat and wear your insides out before you become a bastard forever. Weirdly, she kept dangling the promise of her favorite club, the one with the supposed magic mirror, over me like a reward. Once you shed your bastard coat, I'll take you to the club to see who you really are in the mirror. I promise. But see, I didn't care. Only Bats could think standing in front of an antique mirror at a crappy club was a reward. For that matter, only Bats would think of survival, because that's what the police academy was for me, survival, as a bastard coat. And only Bats would make it her mission to change someone like me into someone like her solely through the power of love. I'll be honest, I used her. The care that she showed me, the love she gave as freely as breathing, was something I'd literally never experienced. It was like a drug. It was a drug. I became a junkie. I had no intention of doing any of the things she wanted me to do, breaking myself down and putting myself back together, changing my life path, leaving the academy, shedding my bastard coat, and wearing my insides out. I literally didn't even know what she meant when she said these things, but pretending was the price of her adoration. So I pretended. I shouldn't have, and not just for her sake. For mine, too. The way she treated me reminded me of Jason. Like him, she was always pushing me to be something I wasn't, pressing me to be what she thought I was, instead of learning who I was. But I didn't care. Not when she baked entire batches of chocolate chili cookies for me to graze on through the day. Not when she rearranged her shift to pick me up after work, so I wouldn't have to walk home alone. Not when she told me that underneath my bastard coat, I was the sweetest person alive. Not when she told me there was nothing I could do to make her let go of me. Not even when she exerted every bit of power she had over me to make me to stay in her dark, bright, cluttered apartment with her other problem people. Soon I spent more nights at her apartment than mine, curled up in a blanket nest on her bedroom floor under a web of purple string lights. I wasn't the only one. At any given time, there were several other people crashing on her couch or her floor. She was closer to all of them than to me. Just as an example, she took these other friends out every night. They always went to club with the magic mirror that supposedly reflected who you really are inside. The mirror I wasn't ready for, and I wouldn't even have been able to go. I had to be up at 6 every morning for the academy, and 6 is about the time Bats finally stumbled home after her nights out. But that's not what mattered. What mattered was she was the person I was closest to. But I wasn't the person she was closest to. Bats was the only person I'd ever been able to spill my heart to, but she was the kind of person who spilled her heart to everyone. So she was special to me. I wasn't as special to her, though. We all eventually learned that we don't mean everything to someone who means everything to us. I'm pretty sure most people learn that as kids. But this was my first time, so I kind of hated Bats for connecting with everyone the way she connected with me. Still, there wasn't enough hatred in the world to make me give up the love she gave. So I contented myself with the role of her little pet. Here's the good thing about that. People don't want anything from pets except good behavior. Up until that point, everyone I'd ever been close to had wanted something from me, whether I knew it or not. But all Bats wanted was good behavior. At the end of the day, good behavior is a performance. It's just pretend. I pretended and got the kind of love no one else ever gave me in return. That didn't stop the jealousy. And I was so jealous. I was jealous of the other people Bats loved, of course. But mostly I was jealous of Bats because in every way that mattered, she was who I wanted to be. I told her that once. She laughed and threw her arms around me. Underneath your bastard coat, you're exactly like me. Stupid. Why do you think I put up with your bastardness? It's because I know who you really are. Sure, it's true. You can't spell bastard without Bats. You know, you just have to pull out the extra letters and rearrange what's left. She smiled and drew me in for a hug. Just like you have to shed your bastard coat and rearrange what's underneath. Outside, you're definitely a bastard. But inside, you're definitely a bat. You'll see once I turn you inside out. None of that makes sense now, but it made sense to me back then. What also made sense was my fear. Maybe I was a bat inside, but I was more than my insides. I was my outsides, too. We all are. And I needed every last one of those extra letters that grew Bat into bastard. I needed my bastard coat. What I knew, and what I could never tell her without risking her love, was that the world is safe for bastards. It isn't safe for Bats. And more than anything, I wanted to be safe. That's why I love Bat so much, because she made me feel safe. Except when she talked about her favorite club and its creepy mirror. I don't know why it bothered me so much, but it did. It even got to the point where any talk of that club kind of scared the shit out of me. According to Bats, this club was only for people who'd accepted who they really were. The bouncers were good at figuring that out. Creepy good, Bats told me. And trust me, I know because one of them loves me. But just to make sure, they brought every new patron to the mirror room first. The mirror in the mirror room was magic, and it reflected who you really were. If your reflection matched your outsides, you were good. But if you didn't know who you were, the reflection came out wrong. And when that happened, it drove you crazy. It sounds like a particularly stupid urban legend, but Bats swore up and down that it was true. It'll drive you crazy. I've seen it. That's why I can't bring you to the club yet. I can have a bastard in my house, But I can't have a crazy bastard, so you have to wait until you can wear your insides out. I know this all sounds insane, but it all starts to make more sense when you understand that Bats had a chronic substance abuse problem. She functioned pretty well, but you could always tell when she was high. One of her tells was that she wouldn't shut up about this mirror. Finally, I got sick of it, and one night on her way out to the mirror club with her friends she was actually close to, the friends who were actually her friends, not her pets, asked to come along. She told me no. It's a place for people who have accepted who they are. And you, my little bastard, are nowhere close. Then she kissed the top of my head while her friends who were friends and not pets tittered. Then they all trooped out in a cloud of scarves and body glitter and shimmering eyeshadow. No matter what I said, I wanted to go with them, but I couldn't. The biggest problem I had, the real problem, is that people like Bats ruin the lives of people like me. I grew up as a trailer trash foster kid with no past and no future. Just another dead-end kid trapped in the center of a deadly moat. A kid who had to decide whether to drown or take a running leap and pray to God I cleared the water. I'd taken the leap. I'd cleared the water, but barely, just barely. My heels are still stuck in the bank, and it's crumbling beneath my feet while I pinwheel for balance. Bats, meanwhile, was dancing on the water behind me, calling for me because she thought I was like her, that I was born to dance on the water too. But she only thought that because I pretended so well, because I wore good behavior as surely as I wore my bastard coat. That was the real problem, the true problem. No matter what Bats thought, I was nothing like her. And as I watched her and her friends who weren't pets vanish into the night, I knew it. They were bats, fragile and unsafe, winging through the night. I was a bastard, safe and warm and armored in my coat. Or at least that's what I told myself as I microwaved dinner and went to bed. I dreamed of her club that night. In the dream, tall shadows with blue eyes like stars stalked a bottomless pit that echoed with atonal music and the low, awful laughter that has, for my entire life, suffused my nightmares. I woke as Bats stumbled into the apartment. Smiling and glittering and smeared with makeup, her outfit pasted to her skin with sweat. A cloud of perfume trailed behind her, settling over me as she stepped over my blanket bed. I watched her, feeling like a particularly stupid, ugly little girl. She saw me watching. Bats always saw me, even when I didn't want her to. Finally, she dropped down beside me, a glittering phantom, and stroked my hair. It was an amazing night, she said. I wish you'd been there. And you will be soon. You're so close to shedding your bastard coat. Then I can turn you inside out, and you can finally be you. She was wrong. Weeks bled into each other. I grew more confident. My academy graduation drew closer. I made friends with other people who had taken a running leap to clear their moats. People who encouraged me. People who liked me. The ground beneath my feet stopped crumbling quite so fast, and my bastard coat got heavier by the day. Sometimes in my nightmares, I actually saw that coat. It always melted into my skin and settled over my bones. Instead of me wearing my insides out, my coat was wearing its way inside. One day after work, my sergeant walked me out to my car. She saw Bats waiting for me and said, "Take it from me. People like her will ruin your career." That made me angry. It was so unfair, so untrue, except maybe it was true. Maybe I knew it, and maybe that's why I clung to Bats, because I wanted her to dance up and pull me off the crumbling bank and into shark-infested moat. Except I didn't want that. I didn't. So I began the process of unclinging. Only Bats didn't allow it. I'm not saying that's healthy. I'm just saying that's how she was. And I lapped it up like always. I couldn't help it. I felt at peace when I was with her. I felt loved. I felt like I was home. I wasn't, and I knew I wasn't. But I pretended. Sometimes pretending is all we get. So I pretended Bats was my family. Actually, that's not completely true. She was my family, or at least the closest thing I had. But I pretended I was her family, too. And that really was pretend. Bats loved me, but she didn't love me like family. She didn't love me best. She just loved me like she loved everyone else. But that was more than I'd ever had, and I took it without giving anything back except fake good behavior. A few weeks later, I graduated my academy. Bats refused to come to the ceremony on principle. That's too many bastards in one place for me. The smell alone would kill me. But she took me to mini golf after. She was high and the sky was a blazing, hazy, smoggy rye of colors so beautiful it could have come out of a nightmare. Everything was hot as hell and miserable until the sun went down, at which point it turned hot as hell and perfectly pleasant, like the air was a warm bath. After our game, we bought the biggest drinks we could to 7-Eleven and wandered to the park, where we laughed and yelled and danced like we were drunk. We weren't, not at all, except we were. Once we slurped the last of our soda and crunched the last pieces of sugar-stained ice, we plopped down on the grass and looked up at the sky. There were no stars because of light pollution, but we pretended. She said, "I'm taking you to the club tonight." Why? Because right this very minute, your bastard coat is slipping off and your insides are shining through. You have to see for yourself. Then you'll shed your coat for good. She pulled me to my feet and led me home, where she issued instructions. Dress however you want, but leave your bastard coat open so everyone can see who you really are underneath. I don't remember what I wore, only that the night was so oppressively hot that I sweated through them immediately, but not in a way that made me feel disgusting. In a way that made me feel like I was sparkling. When we reached the club, there was a line winding down the sidewalk. Music inside echoed. It didn't sound like club music, which was a relief. Somehow, the line inched forward with aching slowness because the bouncer took so much time inspecting everyone. He raised their coats, patted them down, made them turn around and around. Normally, this would have gotten my hackles way up. But this wasn't normal. Somehow, there was something completely, primally right about what he was doing. For some reason, that sense of utter rightness unsettled me as much as if he actually had been predatory. "I'm glad it's him tonight," Bat said happily. "He's the one who loves me." To pass the time, I studied the people in line. With unease, I noticed a few faces I'd seen on my recent rounds in the county jail. My mentor's words wound to my mind like a poison current. People like her will ruin your career. Finally, we reached the bouncer. Bat swept forward. The way he looked at her proved her right. He adored her. He checked her over and waved her in with a smile that enchanted even me. Bats crossed the threshold and spun around, smiling at me from a cloud of glitter and shadows. Then the door swung shut and it was my turn. As the bouncer's eyes turned to me, I suddenly felt heavy, so weighed down and terribly, terribly hot, like I was wearing the biggest, heaviest coat on earth. He swept my hair back, turned my head this way and that, tugged the strap of my dress. He had no smile for me. Finally he said, "You can't come in. Your bastard coat has become your skin." The world kind of stopped. I felt so stupid, so embarrassed. So I did what I always did when I was upset, which was laugh. Then I spun around and marched home. To my home, not hers. That night, I dreamed of the club again, of its wide-smiled doorman marching me to the magic mirror. The glass swirled with darkness and blinding light, and dozens of eyes, each and every one locking onto me. Terror drowned me, followed by panic. I twisted and flailed against the bouncer, who flung me in front of the mirror. I knew, deep in my heart, that I couldn't look at my reflection, that I couldn't inflict whatever waited there on the world or myself. So I closed my eyes. Then I woke up and got ready for work. Bats was waiting for me when my shift ended. I tried to avoid her, but Bats didn't know how to be avoided, and I didn't know how to stay away from someone who loved me. So I got in her car and she drove us back to her apartment. Back home, back when I was in foster care, I always dreamed of coming home. In reality, going home only ever felt sad, but in my dreams, stepping across the threshold into my parents' home felt like a relief so profound it was heartbreaking. Stepping into Bat's apartment felt like that. It always felt like that. That's why I couldn't ever stay away from it, or her. I know it wasn't fair. I'd never been fair to Bats. From the very beginning, I always took more than I gave. But something about my experience at the club, about the bouncer's face when he told me my bastard coat had become my skin, made me take even more from her. And the more I took, the more she seemed to love me. So I kept taking without giving. And I wasn't the only one. Just look at who stayed in her home, who she spent her time with, who she sought out, who she protected. Bats loved people who needed her, and she gave everything to people who took everything. So that's what I did. I thought it would be okay. Well, no, that's not true. I just never thought about it. She did, though. One day while making another batch of those chili cookies, she said, "I think you only love me because I get what no one else ever has. And I'm glad because that means you'll never let me go." Then she hugged me, in the process powdering me with flour and cocoa and cayenne pepper. I felt the weight of my bastard coat sinking into my skin, sinking deep, turning my insides into itself. "I'd never let you go anyway." I lied. She didn't answer. When bats didn't answer you, it meant she didn't believe you. And honestly, that pissed me off. So I decided to do something about it. That night, like most nights, she took off with her friends who weren't pets to go to their magic mirror club. I stayed behind. As I got ready for bed, I put my pajamas on inside out. When Bat stumbled in at 5 in the morning, she didn't notice. When I got up for the day, I put my shirt and my pants on inside out and made breakfast. She staggered into her tiny kitchen a little later, bleary-eyed and so smeared with makeup. She looked more like an impressionist painting than a person. It took her 15 minutes to notice my clothes were on inside out, and when she did, she laughed until she hiccuped. "You'll shed that bastard coat soon. Don't worry." The thing is, I think I could have shed my bastard coat right then and there. I could actually feel it, heavy on my shoulders, off-center and slowly sliding off, almost without realizing. I shrugged my shoulders up, just like you do to keep an actual, real, oversized coat in place. Nothing important happened for a while after that. More work. A couple of magical outings with Bats sprinkled between dozens of outings with my new work friends. More nightmares about the club with its mirror. And like any junkie presented with an endless fix, I kept taking more from Bats than I gave. This sounds crazy too, but taking from her made me feel stronger, more stable, more me, like the ground was no longer crumbling beneath my feet. Bats, meanwhile, seemed to shrink. She diminished, somehow, and she was always so cold. Even when she came home from the club, she was no longer a furnace giving off sweat-damp heat. She was cool and clammy, like she was sick, or like something was eating her. Knowing what I know now, I think something was, and I think that something was me. She came to the same conclusion because she woke me up one night, drunk and staggering. "I'm sorry I'm drunk," she slurred. "I know you hate it, but I had to get drunk because that's the only way I can say this to you. I don't want to say it, but I need to. You know how that feels, don't you? When you need to do something, even though it's the very last thing you want." "Yeah," I said cautiously. She gave me a broken smile as her eyes misted with tears. "Your bastard coat's trying to shed, but you keep putting it back on, and you keep using me to help. I can't do that. You need to be who you want to be, whoever that is. But if you want to be that, if you're fighting to turn into that, you need to do it somewhere else, with someone you're not using." The bottom fell out of my world. Anger immediately welled up like blood in a wound, buoying me. "Other than my sister," Bat said, "there's no one I'd rather be around than you. You're my favorite. I'm your favorite too. But you're my favorite because I love you. I'm your favorite because you use me." That was the end. Even though she could barely walk in a straight line, she insisted on escorting me back to my apartment. I was selfish, so I let her. On her way back home, she got hit by a drunk driver and died. The guy is still in jail. I know because I check every year. My world shuddered on its axis and collapsed, leaving me to cling to the rim of reality, to the soft wet edge of that moat as the ground crumbled beneath my fingers. The weeks following were half hazy living nightmare, half starkly boring monotony. Everything was far too real, even though nothing was real enough. For some reason, I started running. Before work, after work, all day on my days off. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and just go out for a run, flying blindly through the night in darkness, thick and warm as syrup. I don't even remember it. I remember that I did it, but don't have any actual memories. Just a dreamy, endless impression of my feet on sun-bleached concrete and ribbons of buckled asphalt and tired yellow grass in the park. Hour after hour, night after night, I ran. Almost like I was looking for her. I think part of me was trying to catch her somehow before she got hit by that car. Hoping I could turn back time or change the future. Or maybe just slide into a world where she was still alive. Maybe the very same world where crossing my parents' threshold was a joyful homecoming instead of the latest step in our dysfunctional dance of separation and reunion. I was running through a living nightmare of my own, making a chase down a dream. And one night, just as the weather began to turn, still warm but with a taste in the air, I woke up. Reality rushed back in, brightly lit and dark-skied and irretrievably broken, and I found myself in front of Bat's Club. The line wound around a block, full of people coated in multicolored lights. I went to the back of the line and joined them, snaking forward step by maddeningly slow step, until I was finally face to face with the bouncer, bathed in every hue of neon. It was the bouncer who turned me away before, the one who loved bats. I expected him to denounce my bastard coat and send me on my way. Instead, he waved me in. The inside of the club reminded me of Bat's apartment. Dark walls draped with color and tangled webs of string lights. The cramped floor was dotted with mismatched tables. There were only two doorways, the one I just entered, and a wildly ornate door with a wooden sign that said "Mirror Through Here." At the back was a stage so tiny I couldn't figure out how the band fit on it. Their music filled the place. It wasn't club music. I couldn't tell you what genre it was. It was soothing and unsoothing, happy and heartbreaking, home and somewhere far away, all blended together into invisible smoke. I took a seat at one of the mismatched tables, one that reminded me of the nicked, scratched, paint-splattered folding table my grandma kept in her old house, and watched the band. When the set ended, I stood up just as someone touched my hand. I looked up and saw the bouncer. He looked back with resignation. Then he slid into the seat beside me. "She told me you were just like her," he said. I didn't need to ask who he meant. "Can I see if that's true?" I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. He gave me a smile, a small, pained one, nothing like the magic one he reserved for bats, then pulled me to my feet and across the floor. I felt like I was in a dream. Not just any dream, but the dream where Bats was fine, where I'd never hurt her, where going home to my mother felt like joy instead of another disaster. A dream where the ground no longer crumbled beneath my feet. The bouncer led me through the ornate door. Bats was there. Bats, laying on a table, motionless and slack and asymmetrical, bruised and broken, torn into pieces in special way vehicles break human beings into pieces. Terror drowned me, the strongest, deepest fear I've ever known, flooding the bounds of my moat and threatening to pull me back into the current. But it receded slowly, and once receded, I approached the table. Bats was dead, but not dull. Her skin shone dimly and unevenly, like a guttering flame. In places where her flesh had been ravaged and road-rotted into non-existence, her insides glittered through like powdered glass. Around her was a shimmering, multicolored storm of activity. People surrounded the table. A few I recognized in the shining, smiling pack that drifted in and out of her apartment. People who were her friends, not her pets. People who danced on the water with her, while I watched bitterly from my crumbling shore. Most I didn't recognize at all, although a few felt familiar in ways I can't explain. Two of those were angling a large mirror over her body. They were built strangely, thin, spidery, almost spindly, and terribly graceful. They weren't frightening or ugly, but looking at them too long made my stomach flip-flop, and clench the way it does when I see a horrific injury. Their mirror caught and magnified Bat's chest, then turned sideways so that the bouncer and I could see. My breath caught. Where her heart should have been was a ragged, gaping hole. We've been trying to wake her up since she got here, the bouncer told me. Every word wound through my head, gentle and hypnotic, but she's missing something. You can give it back. I looked at Bat's reflection, at the way different colors rose and fell and danced across her skin, like light on dying embers. At the empty cavern where her heart should be, I understood what the bouncer was asking, and in that moment I was dying to give it. I grabbed my own chest, expecting my fingers to sink into my skin the way my bastard coat did in nightmares, or maybe for everything to already be cut open. It's insane, but somehow I really thought I'd be able to reach into my own chest cavity to pull out my heart and put it in her chest. I wanted to. I was ready to. The bouncer took my hand again. It's not that easy. First, we have to make absolutely sure you're just like her. Then he turned me around to face another, much smaller door across the room. It was half open. Darkness bled out. Etched into it were the words mirror room. Bat's magic mirror. The mirror that shows what you really are. That proves you're who you really are or drives you insane. The thing I realized that I feared more than anything. The bouncer took me by the arms like an insolently graceful dance partner and led me to the door. Unlike my nightmares, I didn't fight or flail, and he didn't fling me down. He only pushed me inside gently, then shut the door. The darkness was absolute and my terror overwhelming for one endless second. Then the light snapped on, heavy as syrup, hot as the sun, illuminating swirling storms of dust in the massive mirror across from me. I caught a glimpse of my reflection. Just a glimpse. It was enough to make me panic. I covered my eyes and stayed that way for a long time, sweating under the lights with my hands pressed to my face. At some point, I realized I was shaking. That opened the door for other perceptions, each more painful than the last. The heat, the sweat cutting rivulets down my painfully hot skin, my clothes clinging to me like oily film. And over it all, thick and heavy and maddeningly itchy, was a coat. The heaviest, itchiest, most awful coat I could have ever dreamed of. My bastard coat, somehow brought into reality. It wasn't just itchy, it was painful. I felt like it was sinking past my sweat-soaked clothes and straight to my skin where it just kept sinking. I could feel the individual fibers, 1,000 white-hot filaments, cooking their way into my body, my outside eating its way in. I finally parted my fingers to bare one eye. I kept it squinted, ready to snap it shut at the first hint of insanity, and glanced at the mirror. All I saw was me. I covered my face again and took a deep breath. I steeled my spine, squared my shoulders, then I dropped my hands on my sides and opened my eyes. My reflection was only me in a ragged, sweat-drenched coat with a funny motley pattern. It hung wide open, so huge it threw most of my body into shadow. My skin glimmered strangely underneath, not with sweat, but something else. Not anything beautiful. Something eerie and upsetting. The visual equivalent of the bone-chilling music I always hear in nightmares. But it wasn't a nightmare. It was me. Just me in a big, ugly coat. Relief crushed upward like a reverse avalanche and burst out of me in peals of laughter. My knees went so weak that I lowered myself to the floor amid the storm of swirling dust. The coat tented over me as the syrupy hot lights dimmed. The room was still oppressively, terribly hot, but softly so, like the mini golf course after dark, suffocating but pleasant, like a hot bath. The door creaked open. Soft footsteps approached. Someone knelt beside me and slid their hands under my coat. I tensed up as a dozen ugly memories of even uglier touches threatened to crash over me, but those hands only went under my arms to raise me gently to my feet. It was a bouncer, apologetic and gentle, and so sad. "You're not a match for her," he said. Another reverse avalanche crushed upward, this time exiting in the form of sobs. I'd failed her. I'd used her until it killed her, then failed her. He put his arms around my shoulders the way Bats used to do. "Don't be sad. She won it this way. You're not the last person she wants to take from, but you're close. This is better. I promise." He led me into the room where Bats lay slack and asymmetrical on her table. As we passed, I took her hand one last time, focusing on the feel of her broad palm and long fingers, while people I couldn't bring myself to look at angled the mirror over her missing heart. But I caught a glimpse of her face in the mirror. Her reflection at least didn't look slack or asymmetrical. She was horrifyingly beautiful and monstrously lovely, the worst yet most welcome thing I've ever seen. The bouncer walked me out past the mismatched tables in the band and the glittering, shimmering people in the shadows, and all the way back onto the street, where he straightened my coat and smoothed my hair back. I noticed for the first time that he was wearing a coat, too. It was a different color and pattern. Stripes, not motley, but cut exactly the same. Unlike mine, is fit perfectly. Beyond perfectly. Like a second skin. It's okay to wear a bastard coat, he said. You don't have to wear your insides out, just as long as your outsides don't wear in. She didn't understand that. He gave me a sad and enchanting half-smile. I'm glad you're not a match. It would have hurt me to take you apart. Then he sent me on my way, with my bastard coat dragging on the ground behind me. I staggered home just like bats used to, stumbling through my apartment in a haze of shimmering sweat. I collapsed on my bed as the room spun gently. As I fell asleep, I noticed I couldn't see my coat anymore. I could feel it, heavy as ever on my shoulders. But I couldn't see it. I haven't seen it since. I know it's there. I feel it sometimes when I focus, but it's not heavy or too big. It just feels like a second skin. Anyway, I didn't learn anything from that. I didn't become a better person. I didn't change my ways or have some kind of stoner-ass Ebenezer Scrooge awakening. I just woke up the next morning, standing on the edge of my moat while the ground crumbled under my heels, and missed her. I don't know what else to say, except I'd give a lot to go back and change it, or at least to give her a fraction of what she gave me. Story 2. I watched a cartoon show that never existed. When I was a kid, from around ages of 2 to 10, I always watched the same show after school, Dandy's Wondrous Adventures. It was a show that I had kept tabs on ever since I was a baby. It had been with me since the beginning, and for good reason. Even as an adult, I can point out the many lessons the show taught me as a boy. How to tie my shoes, how to properly eat, how to keep up conversations, etc. It was a much-needed show for a kid of my upbringing. My dad had died before I was born in a botched robbery, and my mother worked as a surgeon, meaning she was gone most of the day, coming back home around 9 to 10 at night. So, most of my youthful lessons were taught by the show. Every episode entered the same. Dandy, an anthropomorphic dandelion, and his sisters Rosie, Daisy, and Blue Bonnie would run up a hill, click their heels, which were leaves, face the viewer, and ask how their day had gone. They'd wait for about 5 seconds and would respond. If the episode was oriented around something happy, they'd all smile and say, "That's terrific." If it was oriented around something not happy, they'd all share a small look of unanimous dissatisfaction and say, "Well, ain't that a shame?" Every time I came home from school, I divulged into characters on how my day went. I always would be disappointed when my response didn't match theirs, and it never did. I tallied the times I matched their response with mine, and I was down by 47 marks to my 0. Regardless, it was nice to see whatever my favorite cast of characters had in store for me that day. However, the static stream of constant enjoyment changed one afternoon. It was a rainy April day, and I had just gotten home after the torrent of watery sheets had ended its assault on me. I had no homework for the day, and after finishing all my chores, I galloped upstairs to turn on my TV and pay a visit to my friends. Once again, the episode ended the same way, with Dandy and his sisters dancing up the hill, stopping and asking me how my day had gone. My day had gone pretty poorly. At school, I had a teacher named Ms. Carroll. I was the quiet, nerdy type in elementary school, so Ms. Carroll saw me as easy pickings. She'd berate me day in and day out about how weird I was, how I had no friends, and how I was a loser. Anytime I tried to report her, no one believed me. Usually I didn't respond, but today hurt a lot worse. One of my classmates told her about my dad and used the newfound information as ammunition against me. She'd never hit me, but it felt like she did. It hurt. I confided with Dandy on the issue. How much I hated her, how rude she was, and my anger towards her for being such a jerk. In my endless tirade about how much I deplored her, it slipped my mind that Dandy hadn't said anything. It had gone well over 5 seconds, but they didn't speak. No interruptions. No exclamations. Nothing. Silence. Even the music had ceased. Once my rant had subsided, I turned to look at the TV. Their expressions were not the usual ones they wore. They didn't look happy or mildly sad. No, they looked mad. All of them wore this expression of intense grimace, like someone had just told them off, or stole something and gotten caught doing it. Dandy looked the angriest. How rude, he said, his speech sounding as if his teeth were clenched. Blue Bonnie stepped up to the screen, her arms crossed, staring dead at me like a hawk. People like that are just so bad, right? She proclaimed. You said it. They all announced. Slowly, their expressions of disdain faded. Dandy spoke up again. Well, it's a good thing we're talking about bullies today, huh? They all shook their heads in approval. The episode transitioned to a school area, where they all gathered in what I would guess was a cafeteria. It was rosily colored, with hints of bright pink, yellow, green, and red across all the furniture in the room, ranging from tables to art. Common colors for a kid's show. Rosie pointed at another flower. He wasn't a part of the usual cast, but they all regarded him with some level of knowledge. That's Ms. Wilkins. She's the worst. Rosie exclaimed. She's a school bully here. And worst of all, she's a teacher. Everyone is scared of her. Daisy said. Dandy took his place in the center of the screen. To get a bully off of you, sometimes you have to teach them a good lesson. Give them a reason to think twice before messing with you. Right, guys? They all unanimously uttered in MHM before turning all at once to the screen. Blue Bonnie looked at everyone else. But won't you get in trouble for something like that? She said. They all looked at her before turning back to face me. To get a bully off of you, it's worth it. Their expressions then changed one of a kinder look, smiling warmly at me before returning to the hill. They all joined in unison to wish me good luck for tomorrow, as they always did before the credits rolled. I was stunned. It was like the universe had aligned at that exact moment to help me with my problem, but it was the wrong solution. As much as I despised her, it wasn't worth it to get in a whole load of trouble for fighting a teacher. What good would it do to help my problem, anyway? I'd have to do some serious damage to her for the bullying to cease. A simple hit to the nose would just make my problems worse. It honestly felt like the advice they had given me was, for the first time, bad. By that moment, the constant pitter-patter rain had lulled me into a drowsy mess, so I decided to take a quick nap and recuperate. My head touched the soft, comforting surface of my pillow, and I slipped away into my dreams. Around 7:30, I awoke to one hell of a wake-up call. Wake up. It was violent, aggressive, booming, as though a prison warden was waking up an inmate. There was no friendliness in the command, no leeway, just rage. I popped out of my bed like a meerkat that had sensed an impending threat. But when I did, I saw that the TV had been turned on, and there he was, Dandy. However, strangely enough, his sisters weren't there. The background was dark, nearly pitch black, with only the moon present in the frame. The grass that was usually bright had turned sickly, adorning a new, yellowish color. So you won't listen? Dandy said, his eyes furrowed into a deep, burning glare. We are trying to help you with a problem, like we have for years. I didn't know what to say. It felt as if my body was stuck. Was this sleep paralysis? Was it a dream? Do you not like us anymore? Before I could find the courage to stammer anything out, his sisters came into the shot. Because we don't like you. We never liked you. Their words burned, while my throat felt like it was held in place with barbed wire. Dandy moved forward. Maybe she's right. Maybe you are a loser. They all began to snicker, until it eventually devolved into laughter. They shot out snide remarks, comments about my hair, face, and anything they could latch on to. They even bit into my dad's death. He probably did it on purpose. Who would want to have a son like you? Rosie said, I bet he faked his death to get away from you. Blue Bonnie said, or maybe he did himself out of disappointing dash. Before Dandy could finish what he was going to say, I shut the TV off. I was a hot mess of tears, snot, and fear, balled up on my bed. I couldn't bring myself to move until morning came. It was a Saturday and Mom was at work still. She was a hospital's best surgeon, meaning there were quite a few weekends where she'd be gone for half the day. I wanted to get up out of bed to get breakfast, but I was still in shock after the incident the night prior. Was it a dream? Was it just my imagination? No, it couldn't have been. I felt everything. All those words, insults, and crude remarks. I felt them all. After much thought, I finally crawled out of bed and went downstairs. The sky had cleared since yesterday, with a bright, beautiful hue of blue and yellow beaming down for all to enjoy. After eating a healthy bowl of cereal, I returned to my room and decided to see if I could get some gaming in. I usually game during the weekends anyway, as my mom didn't let me play during school days. After a couple hours on the console, a familiar, yet mellow voice snapped my attention back to the TV. "Hey, friend." It was Dandy again. In the past, that voice would be a source of comfort. Now it frightened me. I stood still, my head not daring to look back at a character who had become just as oppressive as my teacher. "Look at me, please." Dandy's voice wasn't violent this time. It had the same warm aura it had had before the previous night. He sounded apologetic. I slowly looked over my shoulder. They were all there this time. Dandy, Bonnie Blue, Daisy, and Rosie, but they weren't standing. They were sitting on the hill. The background had returned to its entrancing bright blue color, and the grass looked healthy again. Everything had returned to normal, apart from the characters. Their faces now expressed a look of regret, a deep regret. "We're sorry, friend. We didn't mean to lash out like that," Bonnie Blue said, her eyes sporting a much brighter, kinder look. "It isn't you. It's us," Daisy said, her leafy hands clasped together in her lap. "We know you still like us. Really, we do," Rosie exclaimed. Dandy then took his turn to look at me, his character near the leftmost part of the frame. "We had an issue like you once. Ms. Wilkins would treat us badly. She hated every kid she saw in that school, but for us, she hated us the most." I moved from my chair to stand right in front of the TV, my ears, eyes, and mind completely intertwined with the screen in front of me. It was unbelievable. She said that we were troubled children who deserved to be alone. Daisy said, "We had no parents of our own, so we relied on her." Dandy said, "One day, Ms. Wilkins said that she had enough with our behavior. She dragged us into the drawing room, locked us in, and left us there." Bonnie Blue proclaimed. Dandy looked up from his lap, his eyes a constant of sadness and misery. "We never left," he said. "We don't want the same for you." Rosie announced, "You made us happy, so we want you to be happy. We just got scared that you might move on the same path." Dandy said. I smiled at the TV, beaming happiness through their kind words. It was still a show at the end of the day, so I thought that this was their way of teaching courtesy and openness. "But we think it's time for us to say goodbye." My smile quickly dissipated into a slightly open mouth, my eyes wide with surprise. "You're getting old now, big and strong, just like your dad," Daisy exclaimed, her smile replacing mine. "We've taught you all we can, friend," Rosie said. I grasped the TV, words slowly bubbling into my throat of pleas for them to stay. "We always cared about you, even when you were with us back there," Bonnie Blue said. They all stood up and took each other's hands and smiled the widest smiles I'd ever seen them showcase. My head was pressed up against the glass panel separating me from them, my eyes a waterfall of emotion and distress. I begged for them not to leave. "Thank you for tuning in with us, friend," they all said. Slowly but surely, the screen faded to black, and in big white letters, the words the end covered the TV. Then it cut to static. All that remained was me, weeping and shattered. Years later, on my 16th birthday, after a big party with my closest friends, of whom I had many at that point, my mom called me into the living room. I thought that maybe there was another present waiting for me, so I eagerly waltzed into the room with an immense pep in my step. But my mom did not share my enthusiasm. She looked sullen and tense. "Sit down, please," she said, her voice controlled and centered yet anxious. I complied, my own appearance visibly moving downwards into a look of paralleled seriousness. "I know that it's your big day, but we need to talk about something. Something I've been meaning to tell you for a while." What proceeded to be said to me shook the core of my world forever. My mom told me that while it was true that my dad had died in a botched robbery, he wasn't truly my real dad, and that she wasn't my real mom. I had lost my original family a year after I was born in a car accident on the freeway after a truck had lost control and slammed into the side of their car. They died on impact. I was lucky, as I had been at daycare, which they were coming to pick me up from. I had no extended family, so I was put in the foster care program and adopted by a woman named Ms. Wilkins, who was a boarding school teacher in her past. According to Mom, she was an extremely cruel woman who would regularly beat her adopted children for the littlest of reasons, ranging from breathing too loud to having a cough. One day, however, she went too far when 4 of her children, after supposedly protecting me from a vicious beating, were locked in a room for a week. They didn't come back out. The other kids, including myself, were not let out of the house after that to avoid any of us telling another person what she had done to them. Eventually, the neighbors noticed how we weren't ever leaving and called the police. Ms. Wilkins was sentenced to life in prison. I was stunned, unable to move, as though I was locked in place by my feet. Take as much time as you need to process this. I'm right here. My mother said. As my mind began to make sense of it all, I started having sparks fire off in my brain. Ms. Wilkins. I could have swore I knew that name from somewhere. Wilkins. 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 And then it hit me like a boulder rolling down a hill. Ms. Wilkins, the teacher from the show. I rushed out of the living room, up to my bedroom, and through my computer open with almost lightning-fast speed. I looked up the case, typing everything I could in, praying I could find something. For the 5 searches propped up generic results of other heinous foster parents. But then, on my 5th search, I found it. Boarding school teacher charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder after locking children in room. I scrolled through the article, and everything aligned with what my mom had said. There was no mention of my name anywhere, but the presence of them defending another kid was in the article. Along with it, photos of the drawings they made while locked inside were posted onto the article itself. All pictures of them as flowers. At the bottom, it listed the names of the deceased children. My heart sank, and my jaw followed its motion. Rosalina Matthews, Bonnaboo Lee, Daisy McMullen, Daniel Morello. I had no words. I had no movement. It felt as though the world itself had spun upside down, and I was bearing the brunt of it, snapping out of my haze. I looked up the cartoon. I searched for what felt like hours. Nothing. Not a single mention of any show titled Dandy's Wondrous Adventures. It made no sense. What the hell was I watching then? Did I imagine it? Was I going through some sort of trauma-induced hallucination? It shattered what little grip on reality I had left at that moment. Their names, the show, the antagonists of that one rainy day. It all neatly funneled into this one case that I had apparently been involved with when I was just a toddler. And yet, it only added more complexities and more emotions. Fear, confusion, sadness, empathy, and finally, courage. I'm 28 now, and I have been an animator for over 8 years. Recently, I pitched the idea for Dandy's Wondrous Adventures to board, and just yesterday it was approved. I did it for them. Whether or not the show I watched was real, this one will be, and I want to help people just like me, just like them. I've never told anyone this story, and I never planned to, until today. As of writing this, I received an envelope at my door from an anonymous writer. All it says on the front of the envelope is, "From your friends." Inside the envelope was a crumpled, old, worn piece of paper. It looked as though it had been set out in the sun for years. On one side of the paper was a drawing, as though it was made by a kid, or rather, a group of kids, as the styles are all different. It looked fresh, completely out of place with the worn-down canvas that had been used. On the drawing is them, the characters. They all adorn beautiful white wings and halos above their heads, while small, pretty purple butterfly guides them towards the sun. All of them are hand in hand, just like the last time I saw them. On the back, in 4 corners of the paper, in yellow, indigo, red, and white, was the same phrase, again and again, yet the meaning and significance of the phrase remained constant. Thank you. In the middle, a heart presented itself, with it colored in quadrants, the same colors used for messages. Thank you too, friends. Story 3. I didn't recognize the people on my walk. Since I was a boy, I've moved around a lot. It's because of my work. I'm a preacher. I go from town to town to spread the word as far as I can. I love my work, and I wouldn't change it. But I sometimes do miss the small town I grew up in. To be honest, it was so small I'm not even sure it qualified as a town. In a place like this, you feel like the world is leaving you behind, like you're frozen in time as everything happens around you. But there are a lot of good things about it that I feel get overlooked. I've never felt a sense of belonging like I did in my hometown. Everyone knew each other, and everyone was a friend. We had a sense of love and community that made life so much more colorful and beautiful. We worked, celebrated, grieved, and endured together as one people, in the good times and in the bad. We didn't have many of the things we do now, especially in a town like that, but we never felt that we needed them anyway. We walked to school and to church, and we entertained ourselves with endless adventures in the wilderness. But nowhere is without its dangers, and my home was not an exception. Most families here were very religious, and with that, most of them were very superstitious. The dead were never to be disrespected, and spirits were feared. I grew up on ghost stories of La Llorona's cries and El Silban's whistles, but it wasn't like horror movies. We didn't live in constant dread of oppressive demons and monsters. We treated them as part of the land. Parents would warn their children of spirits the same way they warned us about wild animals or storms. A danger, yes, but not always a fear. Still, my parents didn't take risks with me. I was an only child, and looking back, I could see that both of my parents lived to ensure my future. It was a long walk to school from my house, about an hour and a half one way. But my father would wake up early to go with me, to make sure I was safe. We left before the sun was up, and those talks we shared under the desert stars were some of the best times of my life. But one morning sticks out to me in my memories among the rest. Like a crooked piece of paper in an otherwise neat filing cabinet. It was dark that morning. Clouds obscured the heavens and filled them with thick ink. The desert seemed quieter too. No yipping coyotes or cooing owls. Still, the trip was not abnormal otherwise. Until about halfway through at least. We walked along the dirt road as we always did, our boots crunching the dust as we talked about anything and everything. I was always full of questions, mostly about our faith. I was always interested in the spiritual. Even as a boy, I wondered about what any child would wonder about. Do dogs go to heaven? If angels have wings, why don't we ever find feathers? If I pray really quietly, does he have to lean in to hear me? My dad answered them all with patience. I worry I may never have. Our conversation was interrupted by footsteps. They were quiet at first, but rhythmic, almost like a march. Crunching, scraping steps from the other side of the road, coming from the direction of the town towards where we had started. They were quiet at first, but rhythmic, almost like a march. Crunching, scraping steps from the other side of the road, moving steadily toward us from the direction of the town. Then I saw them, a group of maybe 10 people, dressed in baggy work clothes. Most wore wide-brimmed hats that shadowed their faces, and none of their gazes turned from straight ahead. Their steps never faltered, not even on the loose stones. I raised my hand to wave, but my father caught my wrist before I could. His grip was tight, harder than I had ever felt from him before. I turned to him with a confused expression that he read even in the dim light of dawn. He answered my question before I even asked it. I don't recognize those people. They're not from here. I wanted to protest. We had always been welcoming of outsiders before. My parents had even hosted a few needy foreigners in the spare bedroom. I knew my father was wiser than me, but I wanted to point out to him that ignoring foreigners was not what the Bible said to do. But he dragged me down the road by the wrist until the crunching of their boots had faded. At that point, my father got to one knee to meet my eyes. I seldom saw such intensity on his face. He spoke quietly, yet his tone was as hard as iron, and it left no room for debate. In a town like ours, everyone knows everyone. Those people, I didn't know a single face. Tell me, son, what business would strangers of walking toward nothing in the dark of morning? His words confused me, but he bypassed this with a simple command he knew I could follow. If a stranger like that ever talks to you, never answer. Don't even look at them. Just keep walking. Understand? I swallowed my defiance and nodded. My father stood and we kept walking. But even now, all these years later, I can still hear the crunch of those boots behind us, steady and unbroken, as if they never stopped walking that road. It wouldn't be the last time I heard them. Years went by. I was around 12 at this point. But, like I said earlier, time stands still in places like this. My routine was the same. I got up, walked to school, walked home after, and did chores. It was normal for kids my age to walk to school alone. But my father was still a protective man, and usually went with me. But this morning he had fallen ill. He was the kind of man who worked through fevers without complaint. So when he said he needed a rest, my mother and I didn't question him. He was so pale, and I had never seen him look so weak. Normally, he was like an immovable foundation, but lying in that bed, he seemed fragile. It was an alien feeling to see him vulnerable. Before I left, my mother put my lunch in my bag and handed it to me. She took off her necklace, a thin golden cross that her mother gave to her, and put it around my neck. This, other than my dad being sick, was the only change in my morning routine. She said a quick prayer over me, kissed my head, and sent me off to school like she always did. I stepped out into the cold desert morning air. It bit at my cheeks and ears. It was a beautiful morning, and the silence of the desert was almost spiritual. I walked silently, not out of fear. Rather, I did not want to disturb the peacefulness I was walking through. The moon was still up, a crescent of light guiding my way in tandem with a billion glittering diamonds. That morning, I kept my questions to myself, saving the more urgent ones for my dad. I was so deep in thought that I didn't notice the first few scraping steps behind me. By the time I did, they had already fallen into rhythm with my own. By the time I did notice, they were already in view, a group of what looked like laborers, walking to nowhere in the dark hours of morning. By the time I remembered my father's words, "Don't even look at them," it was too late. I had been practically gawking at the leader of the shuffling crowd. I saw his head pivot, the brim of his hat turning to meet my gaze. I looked away as fast as I could, but I saw, for the smallest fraction of a second, our eyes met. And that was enough. My father's words echoed in my head, "Don't even look at them." But then it came, a sound worse than their march. Silence. Every boot had stopped at the exact same instant, scraping dust one last time before falling still. The desert air felt suddenly heavy, the way it does before a storm. I didn't dare look, but I could feel them, dozens of eyes pressing against the back of my neck. I kept walking. I prayed under my breath that they would just keep walking, that they'd leave me alone. They did keep walking, slowly and in the wrong direction. Every crunch of my boots was answered by theirs, as if we were reflections walking side by side, separated by a river of gravel. I didn't look, but I felt them there, 10 figures in perfect step, only a few feet away. That's when I heard the first voice. "Hey, come over here. I need to show you something." I forced my eyes to stay where they were, and I walked faster. Then another voice. "I need help. Please help me." Yet a third. "I'm lost. Can you give me directions?" And then a choir of questions, of begging, of demanding. "Your father told me to come get you. Don't you remember me? I found something shiny. It's yours if you want it." I ignored them. I walked faster. They matched my pace. Their voices picked up intensity, snowballing into anger, despair, pleading, screaming, and wailing. "I'm hurt. You can't leave me like this. I know where your house is. If you don't come here, I'll go kill your mama. Stop. Look at me. Come here." Beginning with the desperation of a dying man, weeping like a widow, screaming with rage, yelling with fury. It was unbearable, but still my eyes stayed down. I clutched at my mother's cross, praying softly that they would just leave me alone, that they would just leave me alone. It went on this way for another mile, until I reached the city. The moment dirt gave way to tar, they fell silent. Every voice stopped midward. As one, They turned, shuffled back the way they had come, their boots scraping gravel in perfect rhythm. Not one of them looked at me. Not one of them stumbled. It was as if I had never been there at all. And the desert was silent again. I never took off that cross again. I saw them again. Many times until I moved out of my parents' house. But never again did I look at them. Never again was I tempted to speak to them. I kept my eyes forward and walked. And they did the same. I don't know what would have happened had I listened to their demands. Nor do I know what unreachable destination they're walking to. But I do know that my father's words should be abided by. If you ever see faces you don't recognize, just keep walking. Story 4. A sick man commandeered our bus. He won't tell us where we're headed. We haven't stopped in a while, said the woman across the aisle. She'd never said a word to me before. It's funny how that works. We shared this commute through the city every morning. And all I knew about her was that she liked paperback thrillers and wore a mauve peacoat when it was chilly out. We even got off at the same stop. I always headed left towards the shopping district, while she disappeared into one of the corporate office buildings across the plaza. I looked up from the word puzzle on my phone. Startled, pardon? She took off her sunglasses, her dark eyes fixed on mine. Why haven't we stopped yet? I looked down at my word search. I completed 3 entire rounds. Usually I barely got through the first before our stop. Glancing up at the destination sign did nothing to calm my rising confusion. It flickered on and off, displaying North 5th Street and Winston Avenue interchangeably. I don't know, I admitted. Weird. The woman snapped her novel shut and stood up a huff, gripping the guardrails and weaving between other commuters as she made her way to the driver. He didn't turn around. Sir, she said, raising her voice over the shuddering of the bus. You missed our stop. I have a meeting with a client that I can't be late for. Can you hear me? The driver said nothing. The woman stood there, arms folded, then dug her phone out of her coat pocket. This is ridiculous, she said. I'm reporting this to your company. I thought it was a bit of an overreaction at the time. I returned to my mobile games. I heard her wait on hold, transfer to another line, wait on hold some more, then finally lodge a complaint with the bus company. All the while, we still hadn't stopped. I noticed that other passengers were beginning to look uncomfortable and irritated as well. A couple of teens in school uniforms were huddled together in the back corner, whispering. The young mom bouncing her baby on her knee began to glance out the window, her brow furrowed. An older, balding gentleman near the front tapped his cane against the seat impatiently, then stood up. Listen to the lady. Gosh darn it, he shouted up to the driver. We've all got places to be. I didn't know if that was true. I wasn't exactly yearning to get back to boxing to go orders at the noodle place downtown during lunch hour. If anything, this odd little diversion from my routine was a good excuse for a much-needed break. Plus, it would make for a good story to tell to the guys at the shop tomorrow, when the driver still remained silent. The old man made his way to the front. All right, what's the big idea? He said. Look at me. He grabbed the driver's shoulder and tugged. At this point, the driver turned around. His face was pale, almost slimy. He looked ill, his eye sockets sunken. His hair was long and greasy, hanging in strips that fell into his glassy eyes. He gave a wet choke that sounded like a curse, spitting up dark blood onto the old man's face. Then, the driver fell into the aisle with a thud, narrowly missing mauve peacoat woman, who had just hung up on the bus company. He lay there with open, empty eyes, dead. Pandemonium broke loose. Everyone was screaming. The high schoolers pulled out their phones to document the situation. A businessman by the doors heaved like he might vomit. The babies started wailing. Some people shuffled out of their seats while others pulled their legs in, desperate to get as far from the body as possible. The bus gave a sickening lurch, throwing everyone off balance. I felt my breakfast rise in my throat and swallowed, heart hammering in my chest. In the midst of the chaos, the woman in the peacoat stepped around the body, clutching the guardrails. If she was as terrified as I and everyone else on the bus was, she didn't show it. She looked around with narrowed eyes. I approached her. She noticed and ran to meet me in the middle, heels clicking down the blood-spattered aisle. What do we do? I asked breathlessly. She seemed to be the only one not actively losing their mind to hysteria. I trusted her judgment more than my own. Who's steering? She barked. She was right. Somehow, we hadn't crashed yet. I paused, standing up straight. The bus was now rolling down a smooth path while its passengers braced for a collision, which that would never come. I looked out the window. Outside, the city blocks had given way to wider roads. I saw an exit sign coming up ahead. Simultaneously, the woman and I looked up toward the driver's seat. It was mostly obscured by the panicking crowd. We crept our way back up the aisle, avoiding the body. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat. I went up ahead to see who it was. The old man with the cane was steering the bus now, humming to himself. I was both relieved and perplexed. He looked over at me with a smile, his face still flecked with the dead driver's blood. "You look like a responsible young man," he said. "Take over, will you?" "I can't." I had never operated a bus in my life. The old man jumped out of the seat and scurried off. I dove into the driver's seat and grabbed the steering wheel, panicking as the bus lurched once more. I fumbled and got it under control, taking all of my will and concentration to keep the massive vehicle heading straight down the lane. The man had directed us onto the freeway. Cars zoomed by on both sides. I don't believe in God, but in that moment I began to pray to something, my sweaty palms slipping on the wheel. In the wide mirror above the windshield, I could see the back of the man's shiny bald head as he stepped the aisle with open arms. "Will you all shut up?" he bellowed with surprising ferocity for his frail form. "Losing your heads won't change a thing." The chaos paused. Everyone turned to look at him in shock. I kept my eyes on the road. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the tour of a lifetime," said the old man with the bravado of a ringleader. There were noises of protest and confusion. The baby began to fuss softly. "What is this?" The businessman spoke up boldly, breaking the tension. "A terrorist attack?" A wet crunch echoed to the near-silent bus, like a watermelon smashed on pavement, followed by a chorus of shrieks and gasps. In abject horror, I realized that the old man had stepped on the dead driver. "I already told you," the old man said. He sounded impatient. "It's a tour. How dull can you be?" I wanted to leap up and do something, anything, but all I could do was drive. The old man cleared his throat. "Now, first things first. If we're going to get to know each other on this little trip, we can't be buried in our cellular devices. I see you all typing, sending little messages. Can't have that. Give them to me, please." I heard a shuffling, as most people complied out of abject fear. "Please," he said more insistently. Glancing in the mirror again, I saw that he'd drawn a gun from his waistband and was pointing at the woman in the mauve coat. She sat there unsmiling. He cocked the gun. She handed her phone over. "Anyone else? Last call." No one moved. Satisfied, the old man moved to stand at the front again. "Now let's go around. Everyone share their name and, oh, what the heck, one fun fact about yourself." While this was happening, I considered the bus's brake system. The thought crossed my mind. If I could just stop the bus, maybe we had a fighting chance. Or, better yet, if someone could distract him while he was giving a spiel. "I'll go first," the man was saying cheerfully. "Call me Frank. Fun fact, I used to be a pastor before I found my true calling." I scanned the freeway for a safe spot to pull over to the shoulder. Where would we even go if we made it off? It was at this point I remembered. Frank hadn't confiscated my phone. As I tried to subtly fish for it in my back pocket, without losing control of the wheel, I listened. There were 13 of us in total, not counting our kidnapper. The woman in the mauve coat was a lawyer named Natalie. The businessman, Ed, had 3 daughters at home. Kim, the woman with the baby, was a forensic student at the nearby college. The rest of the passengers continued to introduce themselves, but I tuned them out as I opened the message app on my phone and began to type one-handed, glancing up intermittently to avoid swerving. I struggled with how to give our current location to emergency services aside from the general name of the freeway. I scanned the roadside for any kind of signage. Then I saw it. Rest stop 1 mile. I sent my message to 911, hoping for the best. Behind me, one of the high schoolers, Jackson, asked a question. "Where are we going?" There was a long, measured silence. I gripped the wheel with white knuckles, waiting for the worst. "A party," said Frank. "A birthday party." For who, he didn't say. The rest stop came into view. Now was my chance. As smoothly as I could manage, I switched lanes. I took the exit, tearing into the large vehicle zone. It was midday by now. The rest stop was relatively busy, with families and truckers ducking in and out of the main building to use a restroom and buy refreshments. I engaged the brake with a deafening screech. A roar of panic rose as everyone was thrown by the sudden stop. Once things settled, people immediately began to clamber from their seats, slamming against the closed automatic doors and clawing at the emergency exits. I saw something flash in my peripheral. Frank had turned the gun on me. I was cornered in the driver's seat. "If you all leave, this man dies," he said calmly. I shook my head violently, dizzy with fear. If the group sentenced me to death, they had a chance at freedom. If they spared me, who knows where we would be headed. He was offering a literal trolley problem. I stared into Frank's weathered gaze, trying to seem braver than I was. One of his eyes was pure black, like an 8-ball fracture. Somehow, I hadn't noticed that before. It seemed to be leaking a dark, viscous substance. I noticed something else there, too. Desperation, I realized. He didn't want to kill me. I opened the doors. As I did, Ed, the businessman, tackled Frank from behind. The gun went off. I felt a searing pain across my face, my ears ringing from the pain and noise. I crumpled back against the window, head throbbing. My vision swam as I surveyed my surroundings. The two men wrestled in the aisle. There was a bottleneck at the doors, but some people had managed to escape by now. What follows is perhaps the least explicable of all the events I'd witnessed so far. Ed grabbed Frank's head, shoving him to the floor. As he did, Frank's head simply gave way. It crumpled like a rotten pumpkin, splattering more of that viscous liquid across the seats and his suit. Ed screamed, scrambling back and wiping the sick contamination from his body. A steam began to rise from his skin and suit, wherever the liquid had touched him. Circles of pure, raw red were opening up on his flesh. In a matter of seconds, the tiny pockmarks turned to open sores which deepened like tunnels, until it looked as if he'd been burrowed from the inside out. The air smelled rank, like turned meat searing on a grill. I was reminded of a shipment of bad pork I'd had to toss in the dumpster behind the restaurant. How the surface swelled with maggots. My stomach churned. As quickly as Frank's head had come apart, it began to reform, like a time lapse in reverse. The skull and skin rearranged themselves, shards of bones clicking back into place through some unseen means. No longer restrained, Frank went for the door mechanism, forcing them shut again with a hiss. I couldn't fight back. I didn't want to risk touching that walking mass of disease. He was sick in more ways than one. I crawled from the seat as Frank took the wheel again, tried to avoid touching the pools of stinking liquid now leaching from Ed's twitching body. I found my place on the bench and lay there to catch my breath. Natalie sat across from me, her knees tucked in. I wanted to say something, to apologize for not taking her seriously that morning. I didn't have the energy to muster up more than an apologetic look. She turned away, looking out the window. No one felt much like talking. Next to her sat two of the high schoolers, Jackson and a girl whose name I didn't know. At the back of the bus sat an old white-haired woman with a shopping bag, who also had managed to make it out before the doors shut. 5 people, 2 bodies. One driver who I am now certain is not human, at least not anymore. The bus lurched back onto the freeway, careening towards an unknown fate. We were nothing more than its passengers. __. This happened 2 days ago. My temple is still throbbing where the bullet grazed my skin, but it stopped bleeding. I have all but given up on emergency services coming to our aid. It's as if we've entered into some strange dimension where nothing can reach us. Nothing but Frank. We have only ever stopped to get gas or supplies a few times. There is a decrepit, filthy toilet system in the back alcove of this bus. The only food on board were the old woman's groceries. They quickly ran out among the 5 people. Now, We divide up whatever miscellaneous scraps Frank throws our way. He doesn't want us to starve. It's like he needs us to stay alive, for whatever reason. When he leaves, the bodies watch us, propped up in the aisle with vacant glass stairs. I have seen them blink. The other day, I heard Frank muttering to himself about directions. I think we might be close to our destination, the birthday party. I have a prickling in my stomach, almost like excitement. Maybe it's just my yearning for clean air untarnished by the smell of rot. I can't be sure if my messages are making out of this hell at all. I'm bored out of my mind, to tell the truth. I've never been one for road trips. So here I am, shouting into the void to pass the time. Just in case. It's a blue bus with silver stripes, plastered with some beauty advertisement on one side and an anti-smoking PSA on the other. Bus 6. If you see hands, press a glass. Please set us free. We're so very far from home. Story 5. The apartment that waited. When I first moved into my new apartment, I honestly thought I'd hit the jackpot. It was cheap in a quiet neighborhood and close to work. The building was old, yeah, but it had that vintage charm. Creaky wooden floors, brass doorknobs, the kind of place that felt like it had stories to tell. The elevator was slow and groaned like it hated its job, but I didn't care. I was just happy to finally have a place to myself. The first night, though, something felt off. The air inside was heavy, almost damp, even with the windows open. It felt like the apartment didn't want the outside air coming in. I brushed it off, moving stress, I told myself, and went to bed. Around midnight, I woke up to footsteps above me. Slow, steady steps, except I was on the top floor. No one lived above me. I tried to rationalize it. Old buildings make noises, pipes shift would expand. But deep down, I knew it was different. There was a rhythm to those footsteps, like someone was pacing. I stayed in bed, covers pulled up to my chin, and eventually fell asleep, but I woke up uneasy the next morning. Over the next few days, little things started happening. The bathroom light flickered every time I walked in, even after I replaced the bulb. The hallway mirror, God, this one still makes my skin crawl, would sometimes lag, like I'd move, and my reflection would take a split second to catch up. And once, as I was leaving for work, I swear I heard someone whisper my name from the stairwell. It was soft, almost playful, but when I turned around, the stairwell was empty. By the third night, the footsteps came back, louder this time, and there was humming, a soft, low lullaby that made my stomach drop. I sat up in bed, frozen, just staring at the ceiling, listening until it faded away with the sunrise. A couple days later, I finally met my neighbor across the hall, an old woman named Mrs. Green. She seemed nervous when I introduced myself. She didn't even smile, just looked at me with these tired eyes and grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Keep your doors locked at night," she said, her voice shaking. All of them, even the ones inside. Then she just turned and went back inside, leaving me standing there like an idiot, trying to laugh it off. That night, I made sure to lock everything. Front door, bedroom, even the closet. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of a door creaking open. I sat up, my heart pounding, and saw that my closet door, locked, was open, just a sliver. Dark as hell inside, like the kind of darkness that eats up light. Then I heard it, that same humming, soft and deliberate, like it was coming from the closet. I couldn't move. It felt like the room itself was holding me down. I just sat there frozen until the sun came up and the door slowly closed. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I turned on every light in the apartment and sat on the edge of my bed, shaking. When I finally worked up the courage to check the bedroom door, there were scratch marks on the inside, long, thin lines running top to bottom, like someone dragged their nails across the wood. They hadn't been there before. I called my landlord, desperate for some explanation. He just sighed and said, "That place has history," and hung up. After that, Mrs. Green wouldn't talk to me. She wouldn't even open her door when I knocked. One time, though, I caught her peeking through the chain. She looked terrified. "It likes attention," she whispered. "Don't listen when it calls you." And then the door slammed shut. By the end of the week, I wasn't sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd wake up somewhere else. Once in the kitchen, once sitting in the hallway with the front door wide open, and once, this one still haunts me, standing in front of the mirror, my reflection grinning while my face stayed blank. I set up my phone to record one night, just to prove to myself that I was imagining things. The next morning, I played the video. Hours of silence, and right before cut off, this low, guttural whisper, "Stay." That was it for me. I packed everything in a frenzy the next day. I didn't care about sorting or organizing. I just wanted out. As I dragged the last box toward the door, the whole apartment changed. The walls groaned, every light flickered, and then, bang! Every door in place slammed shut at the same time. The air went freezing cold. I could see my breath. And then I heard it, my voice, from somewhere inside the apartment, calling my name, over and over. It got closer, louder, twisted. "You can't leave," it whispered, right behind my ear. "You're mine now." I don't remember unlocking the front door. I don't remember running barefoot down the stairwell, screaming. The next thing I knew, I was standing in the street, shaking, the city sounds wrapping around me like a blanket. I never went back. I left everything, furniture, clothes, even my phone, and checked into a motel across town. Eventually, I found a new place, new building, new neighborhood, no history. But sometimes late at night, when it's quiet and I'm alone, I hear that humming again, soft, patient, like it's just waiting for me to come home. Story 6. I went camping with my friend. We found something that shouldn't have been in the woods. I don't want sympathy. I'm not looking for theories about sleep deprivation or campfire smoke messing with my head. I just want someone to tell me I'm not crazy, because I know what I heard in those trees. I know what I saw just outside the firelight. I know what it left behind. You can say I'm mistaken. That's fine. Just don't tell me it wasn't real. It was my friend Marcus's idea. It's always Marcus's idea: winter hikes, off-trail shortcuts, rafting when the river advisories say don't. I usually give him a hard time and go anyway, but this time I pushed back more than usual. "Where is it?" I asked. "Old Service Road, maybe an hour off the highway." He was scrolling on his phone, showing me a satellite view, a smear of green, a thin silver line, and then nothing, no campsites, no picnic icons, no little tent symbol. Guy on a hunting forum flagged a clearing way out past the marked trails. Said it was quiet, no trash, no sign anyone's camped there in years. "It's posted," he shrugged. "Land management map says public. Nobody's going to be out there." I should have said no. We left early Friday. Tents, water filters, a hatchet, lanterns, my old Polaroid camera, because I like the way photos feel when they develop in your hand. The truck rattled up a rutted road and died in a patch of gravel and weeds. Past that, the trees close in. No self-service. No noise from the highway. Just us. We cut through knee-high ferns and ankle-grabbing roots, worked our way deeper and deeper until the forest swallowed the ribbon of sky behind us. Marcus checked his grandfather's brass compass every 20 minutes, tapping the glass like it would balk if he didn't remind it of north. He had flagging tape, bright orange, looped around his wrist. Every 100 yards, he tied a strip to a branch. "Belt and suspenders," he said, nodding at the compass and the tape. "No one's getting lost." 4 hours later, we reached the clearing. It was bigger than I expected. Not a meadow, nothing as soft as that, but a broad circle of flattened grass surrounded by tall pines and black spruce. The ground sat strangely level, like someone had shaved a ridge and pressed it flat with a giant hand. No fire rings, no bottle caps, not even old ash kicked into dirt. The place felt untouched, and very, very quiet. No wind, no birds, not even the invisible hiss of insects that usually fills the spaces between trees. It felt like the forest had paused mid-breath to listen. "Feels dead," I said. Marcus grinned. "Feels perfect." We set camp at the edge of the circle. 2 tents, a low fire pit scraped the mineral soil. Food hung in a bear bag high on a limb. The light slid down the trunks and pooled at the base of the trees, until it all went the color of copper. I snapped a Polaroid of the clearing, the pale grass, the 2 tents, the orange shape flickering on the perimeter like desperate little flags, and tucked the picture warm into my jacket pocket. We ate beans and jerky cross-legged by the fire. Marcus told a story about his grandfather giving him the compass and telling him never to trust a trail that looks too easy. Like this one, I asked, nodding toward the opening we'd carved into brush. He poked the fire. This isn't a trail. The shadows stretched thin and long. The tree silhouettes leaned over us until the circle of sky was a coin you could cover with your palm. I tried to name constellations. They seemed wrong, shifted. The stars looked too sharp, like points punched through a black sheet. When the fire burned down a heart coals, we crawled into our tents. The nylon must have whirled into soft shapes and softer sounds. The zipper teeth muttered closed. I lay on my back and watched my breath fog the beam of my headlamp. Sometime after midnight, I woke to a sound, not twigs popping, not the light patter of a deer stepping cautious through brush. Breathing, slow, heavy, in and out like bellows. Not close, not far, just past the reach of the firelight, with a clearing pressed against the dark. It paced, measured, circling. The breaths didn't match the rhythm of mine. They didn't match Marcus's either. I could hear a soft, regular snore through the fabric. This was deeper, deliberate, something that enjoyed the drag of air. Then the scrape, not on rocks. On bark, the long whisper of something hard and pointed drawn down a trunk. A pause, another trunk, another pause. Around us, I held my breath until my chest hurt, until my body insisted on air, and I let a little out and drew a little in, try and move the tent as little as possible. The breaths went on, at some point, with no sound marking it. The air felt different, thinner, cleaner. The breathing wasn't gone. Exactly. It was sated, or amused, or something I don't have a word for. When I woke again, it was gray morning, and my mouth tasted like I'd been sucking pennies. Marcus had the camp stove going, and kept glancing over my shoulder at the trees. "You hear anything?" he asked. "Breathing," I said. He nodded once, like that was an answer he'd been waiting for and didn't like. "We'll check the tree lean after coffee." We followed the orange tape we tied the day before, shaking night from our legs. 15 feet into the trees, there were marks on a spruce, for parallel grooves, deep as a thumbnail is wide, scored from shoulder height down to the roots. The cuts were clean, not bare, not anything with a claw that tears and splinters. It looked like someone had carved me from the wood, with a blade that wasn't smooth. We found more marks, on 3 different trunks around the clearing, all at the same height, all pointed inward. "Cougar?" I said, even though I knew that wasn't right. "Cougars don't do that," Marcus said. His fingers brushed the grooves and came back with resin shining. "Fresh." We left it. We had a day to fill. And pretending things are normal is an easy way to move your legs. We took the stream trail Marcus swore he'd seen on a topo map. It wasn't a trail, exactly, but it was a depression in the duff that suggested other feet had once passed through. The forest opened a little into a place where light caught in the needles like dust, and the water ran in a black vein across stones. On the opposite bank, I saw them, carvings, in a dead oak that leaned over the creek. Dozens, maybe hundreds of little figures razor cut into bark, each no bigger than a matchbox. The same symbol over and over. A human shape bent backward. So far its spine made a circle. Thin arms extended, thin legs braced, head tipped to the sky, or where the sky should be if there weren't trees. Every one of them faced the direction of our clearing. "Hey," I said, pointing. Marcus stared for a long time. "Those weren't here last time." "Last time?" My skin tightened. "You've been out here before?" He didn't answer. He crouched and wetted a handkerchief in the stream, then scrubbed the closest marks. The water ran gray and then pinkish. The carvings had bled. Whoever made them had cut through live cambium. He touched the pocket with his compass, like he was checking it was still there. We said very little the rest of the day. Back at the clearing, we rebuilt the fire and stacked extra wood within reach. I swapped dead batteries for fresh. The first stars blinked through. I took another Polaroid, more to busy my hands than to make a record. Tents, fire, Marcus's profile in the orange light, the ring of trees beyond. The smell came just after full dark. Sweet and wrong. Not garbage, not skunk, not rot exactly. Like fruit syrup that's been heated and left to sit until it turns. It moved before the breathing did, a soft ribbon of scent that slipped over the circle, tasting us, then slid back to the black. Marcus's knuckles were white around the haft of the hatchet. "Stay put," he said, like I was thinking of wandering off. The breathing started again, closer this time. It drew around us like a tide around an island, in and out, slow enough to count. Something scraped wood, lightly at first, then with pressure, then lightly again, like fingers testing grain. My lantern stuttered. Not out, just a slow dimming and brightening like a pulse sinking to the breaths. The laugh came after, if you can call it a laugh. Sound shaped wrong. A lung pushing air and catching on something to make it rise at the edges. Amusement without a mouth. It froze me harder than the breathing. The shadows at the edge of the clearing leaned. That's the only way I can say it. The dark pushed itself closer, not by walking but by sort of reorganizing where it was. The fire had to decide how far it reached, and it chose us and nothing else. Something stood just beyond that reach. I saw the outline as a cut in the dark, not because it reflected light, but because it refused it. Tall, much too tall, arms long and loose at its sides, shoulders pointed, ribs like the slats of an old barrel, a head tilted the wrong way, like a listening dog that does understand you. I brought the Polaroid to my face and pressed the shutter. The flash punched a hole in the night. When it collapsed back in, the edge of the clearing was empty. The smell thickened. We didn't say a word. We didn't sleep. Every noise meant the same thing. So words weren't useful anymore. By dawn, mist hung knee-high over the grass. Everything that should have felt like relief just felt like a reprieve. I checked the Polaroid as we packed. The clearing wasn't there. No trees. No tents. No auras of firelight. The whole frame was a wash of whiteness, like snow with no texture. Centered on it, perfectly centered, was a little figure, bent backward into a circle, smiling with a mouth in as a cut. My first thought was that the camera was broken, but when I lifted it, I could feel the warm square still developing under my thumb. The lens was intact. The shutter had worked, and something had worked back. "We're leaving," Marcus said. His voice was raw from not talking. We should have made it back in 3 hours. It took us 9. The forest we entered wasn't the forest we left. The orange tape we tied on way and hung in different places. Higher on some trees, lower on others. And on one trunk it was threaded to a ring of gouges like someone had looped it into a smile. We reached places we didn't remember passing, and didn't reach places we should have hit. The compass needle trembled in a slow circle no matter how often Marcus tapped the glass. By mid-afternoon, I saw our own footprints in a patch of damp loam, where a seep ran across the path. I felt a rush of relief. Proof of a loop we could break, if we only turned. But when I pressed my boot into the print, it didn't match. The tread pattern was right. The size was right. But the angle of the heel, the depth of pressure, the place where I scuffed my toe, none of it lined up with the way I walked. It was like the forest had traced my step wrong, or decided to try wearing it. We stopped at a low rise to drink. That's when I noticed the cairns. Little stacks of rocks, no higher than my knee, circled the knoll. The top stone on each pile was a thin, flat piece carved with the same figure as the tree. The bent spine, the ring, the narrow arms, scratched with something sharper than a knife. Every cairn faced the direction we were traveling. All of them were new. Their bases sat on leaves that hadn't browned or curled. One stack had a feather tucked under the top stone. The feather was wet with something sweet and sticky. Marcus's face had gone a strange color. "We need to step off," he said. "This is bad sign." He said it like a phrase his grandfather had taught him, along with how to hold a compass and how to clean a fish. He cut left, deeper into a tangle of young fir. I followed because going a different way from the only person you came with felt like volunteering to be the lesson the woods wanted to teach. It got darker in the fir. Sound deadened. Our breaths sounded too loud. The air felt warm in a way that wasn't temperature. It felt like the woods had been warmed once, long ago, and remembered it now. We broke out of fir into another clearing, smaller than the first. Oval. The grass here was different, shorter, slicker, like hair on skin. The trees around it leaned inward a degree or two, enough to notice if you stood still. The sky above it pressed closer than it should. In the center, there was a ring of wood. Not a structure, not a fence. Just logs laid end to end in a perfect circle, bark peeled, pale wood exposed. Each log's interface was etched with the same figure as the tree, as the stones, as the Polaroid. On the outside of the circle in the grass were little arrangements of things. Bird bones wired together with thin twine. Teeth strung like beads. Ropes braided of something that looked like fibers and looked like hair. I didn't step into the ring. Every part of me that still believed in being untouched by things like fear and consequences refused all at once. Marcus edged along the perimeter and crouched. The pale wood wasn't dry. It was damp. It smelled sweet. "Let's go," he said. We didn't argue about direction anymore. We went away. The forest led us. By the time we reached the campsite, the sun was low and the clearing had that orange glow that makes everything it touches seem like a memory of itself. We didn't see our tents until we were right at them. They looked wrong. A little too tall. A little too narrow. The lines weren't exactly the lines we'd pitched. The bear bag hung on its limb, fat with food. The knot I'd used to tie it off was a knot I don't know how to tie. "Did you?" I started. "No," Marcus said. My Polaroid was on my sleeping pad, face down. I hadn't left it there. When I turned it over, it was a photo of the clearing at night, with two figures standing at the edge where the trees began. They were taller than the trees. They were bent backward in that circle way, arms too long and too slack. Between them, hanging on nothing, was something that might have been a smile. Our fire pit had been rearranged. Not scattered, rearranged. The stones were stacked into a ring taller than my calf, maybe 20 inches high. There were marks on the inside of each stone, burns, but not from fire. Smudges, like something had exhaled on them until they turned black. "Pack," Marcus said. The words sounded like it hurt to push out. "We're not staying another night." We moved fast. I shoved the Polaroid under my shirt because my pack felt too far away from my skin. I didn't notice right away that the bright strips of orange tape on the perimeter branches were no longer bright. Their color had leached to a pale, dull peach, like a photo left in the sun. We should have left then. We didn't. We were slow because there were more things to look at than our hands. We were slow because we didn't want to turn our backs to trees. We were slow because the world was the size of a circle and there was more outside it than there had been when we walked in. By the time we had everything in place, the light had dipped into that last band of day when you can pretend you're not about to be shut in. The forest quiet had grown teeth. "It'll be worse in the dark," I said. "I know," Marcus said. He said it like he was agreeing with gravity. He swung his pack up. He didn't look at me. "Go." We went. We didn't get very far. The tape we put up wasn't ours. It still sat on the branches where we tied it, but the knots were too tight, the tails too even. On one tree, someone had braided the tape into a little rope. On another, the end had been cut clean, not torn, the edges heat sealed like plastic cut by wire. And on another, the tape hung in two strips like a pair of lips, one long, one short, and someone had scratched a bent-back figure into the bark between them where a mouth would be. We walked faster. The forest walked with us. When we stopped to breathe, everything else stopped too. When we started again, we didn't know we had until a branch cracked somewhere to our left, and the crack was answered by a crack to our right the same distance away, like something pacing us at the distance of thought. Full dark fell in a way that felt more like being closed and then losing light. The breathing came immediately, not outside us, around us. The sound didn't come from a place. It unrolled like a coil, and we were in the center of it. Inhale, exhale, slow, measured, not the rhythm of an animal moving under its weight and air. The rhythm of something counting. We kept going because stopping meant choosing a position to die in. I don't know how long we walked. My hands hurt from where nail met skin. My breath made small clouds that turned to black faster than they should. Somewhere in the middle of that, I realized Marcus wasn't beside me. I turned. My headlamp picked out trunks and brush and the white flash of the tape. There wasn't a sound of me, and there wasn't a sound of Marcus. The breathing went on like we were nothing in it. Marcus. I said, not loud. That word didn't belong in the breathing. No answer. Marcus. I tried again. The breathing stopped. The forest held absolutely still. Then something in front of me moved that wasn't me, wasn't wind, wasn't anything I have a word for. The dark rearranged itself. My headlamp found 2 points of pale that weren't eyes because there weren't eyes there, just the places where eyes would be if something had them and closed them, and above those a suggestion of a forehead, and above that too much nothing. I took a step back, and my heel hit a root. Something brushed my sleeve. Not a hand, not fur, the memory of a hand. I ran. Branches slapped my face and cut my lips. The tape flashed in little funerals of orange. That didn't help. My headlamp caught the white flare of exposed wood where something had rubbed bark away and made it smooth. The wood stopped being a place and became lines of dark I had to not run into. When the breathing stopped again, I fell. I don't remember landing. I don't remember getting up. I remember crawling. Dirt under my nails. The smell of earth and that other smell. The sweet one that makes you think of sugar and heat and then turns in your throat. I remember a shape in front of me that was lighter than everything else, and then cool air on my face and the tight, unsteady miracle of stars. I was at the edge of a road cut into a hillside. A narrow ditch ran along it. The ditch held a trickle of water, and the reflection of my headlamp looked like a startled animal. The road's gravel was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I don't remember how I got back to the truck. The door was open. There was dirt on the seat. I don't remember dragging in. The keys were in my pocket, where I don't remember putting them. I woke up in my apartment 2 days later. The sheets were muddy. My mouth tasted like I'd been breathing through metal. My Polaroid camera sat on the kitchen table next to a glass of water I hadn't poured. The photo of the clearing with the single bent figure lay under the glass, like I'd put it there to keep it flat. Marcus's pack wasn't in my living room. His boots weren't by the door. His jokes weren't in my head where they should have been. His number was disconnected. His socials were empty, not deactivated, not private, scrubbed. The orange tape I'd tied and retied around my wrist that first day sat on the counter, pale as old scars. And then someone slid something under my door. It made a soft whispering sound when it came to a stop. I thought it was junk mail until I saw the knot. It was a strip of pale leather tied around a bundle of hair. Hair braided the same way Marcus used to braid his sister's hair at her soccer games when she asked him to do the rope one. I recognized the pattern. He'd shown me once, leaning over a picnic table, laughing at how serious I looked while I tried to copy him. The braid was cut clean at one end. The cut had been heat sealed. There were markings burned into the leather. Not letters I knew. Not any runic alphabet my desperate Googling would later suggest. Little figures in a line, each a perfect version of the one before. The bent body, the ringed spine, the praised sky, the long thin limbs, and on the inside of the leather, pressed into it like someone had used a brand smaller than a thumbnail, were 5 words in English. You were meant to watch. They weren't crooked. They weren't shaky. They sat straight and clean like something had pressed them one after the other with care. I stared at the braid so long my vision went white at the edges. When I blinked and the room came back, the Polaroid camera had moved. It was closer to me by a few inches. The lens faced my chest. The strap hung off the table like a tongue. I hadn't touched it. I picked it up. My thumb found the shutter, because that's what hands do when they don't know what else to do. The flash went off of my face. The apartment lit white, and then collapsed back into itself. I put the camera down and waited for the photo to develop. The square stayed gray longer than it should have. Then an image came up like bruises emerging. It was a clearing, not the way my eyes had ever seen it. The grass was too smooth. The trees leaned in too far. The tents weren't tents. The ring of stones around the fire pit was taller, and the black on the inside of each was wet. Two figures stood at the edge of the frame. They were bent backward into rings. They were taller than the trees. Where their faces should have been were the places for faces. And between them, on nothing, a thin smile hung the way a strip of leather hangs when it's been tied and then slipped. In the bottom right corner, smaller than my thumbnail, a third figure stood between the first two like a child between adults crossing a street. Its face was Marcus's. I'm not posting this for attention. I don't care if you believe me. I'm posting it because sometimes, just before dawn, I hear breathing in my apartment walls. Not mice, not air through vents. The slow, patient draw of something that likes reminding me it doesn't have a hurry. And because the orange tape that I keep finding tied around my cabinet handles and my bedpost is getting paler. And because I woke up yesterday with resin on my fingers and 4 parallel grooves scraped into the wood of my kitchen table at the exact height my shoulder is when I stand there. And because the Polaroid I left face down on the counter last night was on the floor this morning. And when I turn it over, it was blank white except for a thin ring in the center, burned so lightly into the paper that you only see it if you tilt it to the light. I don't need sympathy. I just need someone else to admit the woods aren't empty. They breathe, they wait, and if you camp in the wrong circle, they smile. Story 7. I live near Lake Lanier, and now I am being haunted. Hello, reader. For privacy reasons, I will be referred to as Lawrence, and this is a story of when I lived next to Lake Lanier. For context, I am 5 feet 6 inches Caucasian male, and I was 20 at the time when this happened. I was living in a 4-story house. Well, if you want to count the attic as part of stories, otherwise 3-story. My neighborhood was peaceful and lots of good neighbors that usually keep to themselves. I lived with my brother, sister, dad, and our roommate, who did the cooking most nights and helped out with other things. My brother and sister were born 12 months apart in the same year, but my sister is usually a year older than my brother till the final month. Now, let's get this out of the way so I can tell you my story of how it all began. It was on my day off during the summer of 2020. I was driving my younger brother and I to the park that was at Lake Lanier. For privacy reasons, we will refer to my brother as Eli. So, Eli, I asked him, "Are you ready for some quality brotherly time?" "Yeah." Eli said, some sort of monotone to his voice. Don't get us wrong. Eli and I get along very well for brothers. Sure, in our childhood, we had our little fights and nitpicks, but we were just kids, and it's kind of natural for siblings to have their little disagreements. Eli, while 3 to 4 years younger than me, was definitely taller than I was. Almost 6 feet 0 inches, I can safely say. But he'll always be my younger brother that I love dearly. "Okay, I want to take the fishing poles or the bags?" I asked him. "I can take the bags." He said, "Carry my backpack and some of our snacks." "Wonderful." I said, grabbing the poles and my phone out of the car before shutting it and locking. If you are wondering, my car is a Chevy Impala 2014. It gets me around awesomely from point A to point B. My silver steed, if you will. Where we arrived, there was a mini beach, a safe area for swimming, lots of picnic tables, and plenty of woods to hike. With me being, well, me, I never liked to swim in the waters. Why? Lake Lanier is supposedly haunted, and many people, including professional swimmers, lose their lives here. I wasn't ready to be on headline news. I was just here to fish. Have any ideas for a spot, Lawrence? Eli asked. I was scanning the area and spots around that didn't have too many people. I'm not really a people person, to be honest. To some it's me being anxious. But for me, I absolutely can't. Especially when you have kids screaming at the top of their lungs. How about over there? My brother nodded, and we walked over in that direction. We had passed a guy who looked to be in his 40s, and someone maybe in his early 20s I assumed was his son. They had just caught a huge largemouth bass. It was quite a sight. My brother and I had reached the spot and took a seat, setting up our fishing stuff. I had chosen a night crawler and an artificial bait. His resembled a crawfish. So you picked that one? I asked Eli. Yep, it's more realistic than flip-flop designs. He had that weird grin and then faced the lake, holding his arm back to cast. I watched him almost like flick his wrist to send his line far out. If I had a good guess, it was about maybe 50 feet. I would normally say it's impressive, but that was truly incredible. Try that one out, Lawrence. You're on. I laughed and took a deep breath, casting out to the waters. Not as far as he did, less. But I gave a nervous grin as I admitted defeat. That one was rigged. Sure it was, he said, and stared out at the lake. It felt like hours when in reality it was minutes. My brother's line started twitching, then jerked. He pulled back and started reeling in the line. I got excited and sat my rod down quickly to watch him fight with whatever got the bait. The end of the pole was holding on as it bent downward, and once it came into clear view, he had caught a largemouth. It looked to be maybe 18 pounds. I didn't doubt my brother would lift it. He was stronger than myself after all. He laughed a little. Hey, let me get a pic. Dad will be amazed. I picked up my phone that I had left and, opening the camera, positioned it to face him. He had a neutral expression, like many photos he was in. I'm not one to tell you to smile. Whatever expression you want to use, I'd accept. Great catch, dude. Thank you, he said, looking at the fish. But as we celebrated his catch and him slowly going through the process of gently and respectfully releasing the fish, I happened to catch something unusual off in the distance. I couldn't gauge how far it was, but something, or someone, was peeking from behind a tree. Pure black, like a shadow, with two white dots that might have been the eyes. Wild hair like a cartoon individual that had been shocked by lightning. It stood there. I had to rub my eyes. Squinting, it remained. Hey, Eli, I asked. Yeah, he said. What's up, Lawrence? Do you see that? Just ahead. I pointed behind him in the direction of the thing. Huh. He turned around and looked back at me. No, I do not. Are you okay? I will admit I have been feeling very anxious lately. Down. Depression even. I had recently been broken up with by my ex-girlfriend of 4 years, who we will call Bridget, as well as the passing of our family cat Carl. He has been my buddy since I was 10. And for him to suddenly be gone before Christmas, a week before, was hell for me. It was so much weight for me to carry over my shoulders. Perhaps this was my negative emotions playing tricks on my brain. It has to be that. Lawrence, Eli said, I know your breakup with Bridget and the death of Carl has been weighing you down, and I can't tell you to shrug it off. But please try and ease up. Right. I looked at the thing that was still there. Maybe it was grief in the physical form of my struggle to let go. You could be right. I'm sorry. I love you, buddy, he said before walking us back to our spot. It was only one more turn in my head before I realized the thing vanished, but that's when it began. I clutched my chest and started breathing heavily. My sound got his attention, and he looked at me. Lawrence. I had fallen to my knees. Wanted to cry, but nothing came out. The figure didn't disappear, but moved. It was now closer, like maybe the distance of 2 school buses parked behind the other. The figure was more clear to me, still black as a shadow, and those 2 bright orbs I assumed were the eyes. Even as my vision blurred and I gasped for air, having symptoms of a combination of night terror and severe anxiety attacks, I saw the figure was feminine. So for this purpose, we'll say it's female. She had no mouth or nose, but those eyes were wide. For better description, research shadow people, and you'll see what I mean. She walked closer, and by some driving force of fear and potentially adrenaline, I got up fast and looked at my brother. Eli, we have to go to the car now. Grab our things, and let's go. I can't stay here longer, I said, and quickly collected our bags. Running to the car, I turned back once to see how far he was. The figure didn't seem to stop to my younger brother, but was advancing towards me still. She was after me. But why? Lawrence, what do you see? Is your glucose out of control? Eli called out, but I was already in the car, waiting for him. I couldn't answer. She was still following, but walking slowly. I could easily outwalk her. She was playing with me. What did she want? I shoved the key into the ignition and cranked the car. Once Eli had entered, I was ready to put the knob into reverse, but the moment I touched it, it was to my realization that she was already there. I slowly turned my head to my window and saw her staring through it. She tilted her head and waved slowly, dragging her finger down the glass silently. I gasped again and couldn't breathe, gripping the stick shift and trembled before loosening my grip, the world going black. And the last thing I heard was my brother calling 911 before I eventually passed out. I had awoken at the house, and Eli was at the foot of my bed. So was my sister Allison. My dad walked in. "Lawrence, what happened out there?" He had asked. "Eli, are you sure you didn't see her?" I gasped. "Who?" He had confusion written on his face. "It was just you and I in the car. There was nobody there except the ambulance that later arrived and the police. It was some shadow." I stuttered. I had described everything to them, what I saw and the way the figure moved. "Lawrence, you're still stressed out, and you're most likely having hallucinations from the stress overdrive." My dad said, "Just rest for now and you should be better." "Eli," I looked at my brother. "What were my vitals? Was I okay?" "They said your blood sugar was fine and your vitals were good. Maybe it's stress. Please, relax." All right. I wasn't one to argue unless I felt I was absolutely accused. But maybe they were right. I was overstimulating and panicked over it. It felt like minutes before I had passed out again. It went from dark to a clear view of the sky. The skies were without clouds, and it looked just like the ones you see in very old VHS-looking movies. There was a castle sitting on the giant hills. The castle looked quite fancy a bit, with a mixture of Transylvania. The camera panned down to show my brother and I in my car driving through the dark woods. Blue skies in the daytime, but the woods are dark because of the very tall pine trees shading us. It was me being the driver as usual. The trip was quiet. It was going smoothly until I saw the figure again. Only this time is very different. This one's shape was odd. A shorter individual. Same weird spikes looking like hair struck by lightning on TV, but wearing a witch's hat, all black. Same big bright white eyes. The figure was darting around in the woods, stalking my brother and I. "Hey, Eli," I asked, "did you see that?" "See what?" he asked, confused once more. This was deja vu. It's strange I even had that memory from the real world. This was a dream. This shadow was a munchkin, but equally giving me those same shudders and feelings of absolute fear as my body forced me to slam on the brakes. But why? Why was I unwillingly doing the opposite of the natural responses of escaping danger? My hand shakingly reached for the knob and putting it in park. I rolled down my window and stared out, waiting. Waiting for what? Lawrence. Eli's voice sounded like it was coming from the distance. He was next to me, though. What was going on? His face then slowly distorted and became enveloped in darkness, his entire body becoming a shadow as he ripped his own clothes off, his regular hands becoming clawed. Again, no details, only darkness. My body was stuck in some sort of trance as the claws dug into my neck as the face formed a mouth, a white one, the eyes looking like scribbled circles. The munchkin had joined in with the shadow that had taken my brother's form previously and opened its mouth to bite down on my neck. The feminine shadow from reality appeared, ripping my door off and putting her humanoid hand under my chin, turned me to face her. She then opened her mouth to let out a deafening shriek of horror, but at the same time felt my soul leave my body as I awoke with a scream. "Lawrence." Allison came in, shaking me. "Brother, what's wrong? Are you okay?" "WH, where's Eli?" I asked. I was looking around frantically. "He hasn't turned, has he?" "Kid." My dad walked in. "Eli is okay." You're okay. My dad was a softie. He hugged me and held me. I was shaking. I felt so embarrassed as a male to cry. It was so horrifying. My dad didn't need me to overdo it. He said it's natural to cry. Usually when I wanted to cry, I had to be alone. But usually Carl would be by my side, kissing me and rubbing against me. He wasn't here. It broke me more. I spoke his name a few times. "Hey, buddy." My dad let go. "There's nothing to hurt you. Nobody is going to hurt you. I promise. You're safe here with us." "Yes, big brother." Allison hugged me. We're here for you. Bridget is a nobody. Don't let her get a hold of your thoughts. I turned my head to look at the window. I saw a mother bird with her babies, feeding them a worm. I slowed down my breathing, tried to ease up. It was difficult, but eventually I was good again. I felt my phone vibrate on my bedside, and I picked it up to see it was a message from Bridget. I shook my head as my heart sank. She texted me again. But what for? I read the message. "Hey Lawrence, I'm checking on you to see if you were okay," was what she texted me. Wiping my eyes, I texted back, "Yeah, I'm fine." I gave her a short answer. When I'm upset with someone or don't want to be bothered, I give a short answer. Not even a minute later, she responded. It was shown she read at the moment I sent her a text. "Are you sure? I can tell something was wrong. Don't worry about me. What do you want?" I finally texted her. "You can say I'm mean for this, but she did kind of break my heart. So it's fair to me. If this is a bad time, I'll come back later to check on you. I just want to see if we could call. Bridget, why don't you talk to one of our mutual friends? Like Abigail? She's female. Your talk could be something she can help you with. Listen, I just want to talk to you. I've known you the longest, and I feel more comfortable with you with what I need to get off my chest." Fine. I was the first to press that call button. It was Instagram ringing. One ring, two rings, then that familiar sound of the other end picking up. There she was. As much as it hurt to see her, Bridget was still a very, very gorgeous woman. She had occasionally changed her hair color, but right now it was strawberry blonde. Her emerald eyes behind her cute glasses. It was like looking through one of those scopes that jewelers look through to see if a diamond was real. That's my comparison at least. Her precious face. But instead of her smile, it was her crying. I've only heard her cry once. This was the second time. She was panting, and I just looked at her dumbfounded. See, I'm not great at expressing or processing my own emotions. It hurt a bit to see her cry. "What's wrong, Bridget?" I tried to sound sincere, but my own heartbreak over her was winning. He and I had broken up. She cried. I kept a straight face. In my mind, I wanted to tell her it sucked, didn't it? To have your heart broken? Now you know how I felt, but no. I just nodded. "I'm sorry. Is this what you want to call me about?" I asked her, sighing. I miss him so much. I wish things would go back to how they were. That shattered me all over again, and I trembled, not just from hurt, but anger, not because he left her. Screw that. She barely knew him for a year for what it seems, and she's crying over him versus us knowing each other for 6 years and being together for 4 years? It was inconceivable. But then as she cried to me, babbling some same words, my heart stopped as I turned my head to look behind my desk. There was an arm wiggling like a snake. It was waving to me like a greeting, and slowly peering out was a shadow woman. Her head almost touched the ceiling, her own body casting like a real shadow, her arms outstretched. She loomed over me, and I felt myself shake again, like a seizure. "Lawrence." Bridget calm enough to get my attention. "Lawrence? Hey!" "What's going on?" I couldn't move, couldn't answer her. My body had its attention towards the shadow woman. Her head rotated slowly, but in a taunting manner too. There was nobody to help me. I could see her step out of the wall and walk towards the foot of my bed, becoming three-dimensional, her claws on my sheets, leaving visible claw marks. My eyes glued to her, I started sweating and trembling, gasping for air but nothing coming in or out. "Oh my God, Lawrence!" Bridget screamed. This was loud enough for my brother, whose room was across mine, to barge in and stare in shock. Could it be he's actually seeing this? "Dad!" Lawrence is seizing again. He yelled. "Eli, is that you?" Bridget yelled. "Tell me that Lawrence is okay." Eli couldn't move. I think he was finally seeing something that I was trying to explain. Dad ran upstairs to my room and stopped at the doorway too. He saw her too. Everyone was at the doorway. The woman was silent as a mouse as she climbed onto my bed on her knees. "Get away from him!" My brother yelled, running to tackle the woman who fell out the window. My brother clinging onto the window. My dad rushing to grab his hand and pull him up while all I could do was sit there in terror. I was too afraid. The woman got up slowly and cracked her neck back in place as I saw two more white eyes. No, 4, 6 total. The Munchkin and the one who impersonated my brother. Both the extras from my nightmare. No, not a nightmare. A precognition. Only this time instead of in the forest, in my own home. Lawrence, come on, we gotta get out. Allison yelled, trying to pull me out. I couldn't. Fear had taken over. Please, they're coming. It was too late. They had made their way upstairs, and the doorway. My 2 Jack Russell mixes were too afraid, too shocked. These creatures scared them this much too. The Munchkin grabbed onto my sister, while the bigger one pinned my brother and Dad to the wall. The woman walked towards me and impaled my arms with her claws. She stared into my face and slowly opened her mouth. She was grinning at the same time. I had enough cognitive to fear my end was here. But then, there was barking. My dogs had sensed me being harmed, and they ran upstairs to confront the shapes. The boy bit down on the big shape holding my brother and Dad, while the girl bit onto the Munchkin, pulling what seemed to be skin. But misty black, both figures released my family, and were trying to shake my dogs off. No more. The female figure whispered hauntingly and grew teeth, biting onto my face. Lawrence. My family screamed. I could have sworn my life was flashing before my eyes. All hope seemed lost. I felt her needle-like teeth scraping and slowly digging into my flesh. I knew I bled cause it was warm and wet. I thought I was done, but there was a sound that made her take her mouth off my head and stare at my face. My eyes turned enough to see a bright light. It was fluffy and had bright green eyes as well as a gold shine to it, and the shape meowed. See, Carl, I stuttered. It was my first word since the paralysis. My buddy had his shape and fluff. He had the day my late mom brought him home. He meowed again and trotted to the bed, jumping up and staring the creature down. Buddy, he stared the creature down, and I could have sworn I saw flakes of her peel away and disintegrate. She let out a very loud, deafening scratch as she swiped out at him only to find her body burning from his pure energy. He let out a hiss and she screamed, exploding into a dark mist. The other 2 creatures also bursted, sharing a scream before it echoed. I looked at him and he looked up at me, nudging me. I felt a wave of security and love as I held him. My family couldn't see Carl, but I could. My buddy then hopped off and I watched him walk the stairs to heaven. I let out a tear and muttered, "Thank you." Once he had gone home to reunite with my late mom, I was surrounded by my family. They held on to me. "Lawrence, I'm so sorry." Eli held me. "I thought you were overreacting." I was at loss of words. No disappointment. Maybe it was that those creatures made themselves visible to the real world when my emotions and anxiety got so bad that they could actually interact with me. But perhaps Carl knew what was there. I looked up where the stairs were and cried, not of sadness, but joy. He had come to say goodbye and moved on. Years later, as I write this, I think back. On my very shelf sat Carl's paw print. I held on to it like a treasure. My siblings had moved out, and I remained with my dad and stepmom's mom, with their dog as the addition to the family. 3 humans and 3 dogs, as well as my recently bought 14 fish I call my children. I can say for sure those were my demons. Every one of my worries and thoughts manifested as figments of my imagination into reality. Realities that want to do unspeakable things to me. To this day, I can see that shine that Carl had on the dogs and fish. Like angels. Perhaps they were angels to not only comfort me, but love me like Carl did. In fact, he was my miracle, just as these beautiful creatures were. I thank God every day for them. Guys, let me tell you it's okay to cry. It's okay to miss the deceased. But just know, as long as you accept they linger in your hearts, then they have never left. Don't let your demons win. And remember, keep your family close. Story 8. I went out to investigate the strange lights over the desert. Now I have a towel over my bathroom mirror, and I'm afraid to look at my own phone screen. My name doesn't matter. My town's name doesn't matter either. It's one of those dusty, forgotten places at the edge of the desert that you only end up in if you were born here, or your car broke down on the way to somewhere better. I was born here. I'm a mechanic. I like the predictable logic of it. A car comes in broken. I diagnose the problem, I apply the solution, and it leaves fixed. Cause and effect. Clean, simple, and honest. My life is built on that same principle. I have a routine. I like it. It keeps the chaos of the world at bay. At least it used to. The chaos started about 3 months ago. It began quietly, without any fanfare. One night, they just appeared. 6 perfect, silent spheres of soft, white light, hovering high in the night sky above the desert flats. They didn't move. They didn't blink. They didn't make a sound. They just hung there, a perfect, geometric arrangement against the brilliant, star-dusted canvas of the desert sky. The first night, everyone in town was out on their porches, just staring up, a collective, silent, awe settling over us. It was beautiful, in a strange, unnerving way. The second night, they were back. Same place, same formation. And the third, and every single night since, without fail. After the first week, the novelty wore off for us locals. They became just another part of the landscape, like the mesas or the coyotes. But the outside world took notice. The internet started buzzing. First came ufologists with their fancy cameras and their intense, wild-eyed theories. Then came the tourists, the New Age crystal crowd, the Instagram influencers looking for a weird backdrop. Our quiet, forgotten little town was suddenly a destination, and it was a nightmare. These people were a plague. They'd block the roads with their RVs to get a better view. They'd wander onto private property. They'd come into my shop, not for repairs, but to ask me a million stupid questions. Have you been abducted? Do you feel any strange energies? Can you point me to the best place to make contact? It was a constant, infuriating disruption to my routine, to the clean, simple logic of my life. Then, about 2 weeks ago, one of them disappeared. He was a typical seeker. A guy in his 30s, drove a beat-up van covered in esoteric bumper stickers. He'd been in town for a month, spending every night out in the desert, trying to communicate with the lights. One morning, his van was found abandoned at the edge of the flats, his equipment still set up, but he was gone. No note, no sign of a struggle. He had just vanished. That's when all hell broke loose. The county sheriff, the state police, news vans from the city, they all descended on us. The town was crawling with them. The search parties were a joke. Dozens of people who didn't know the first thing about the desert, trampling over everything, yelling, shining their lights. The chaos was a constant, grinding noise that was shredding my last nerve. My business was suffering. I couldn't work with the constant interruptions, the blocked roads, the general atmosphere of a 3-ring circus. I decided I'd had enough. The police weren't finding anything. The volunteers were useless. I'm a mechanic. I solve problems. And this circus was a problem. I figured, if I wanted to end, I had to find a solution myself. I know this desert. I know its rhythms, its silences. I thought, maybe if I go out there alone, away from all the noise, I'll see something they missed. A simple, rational explanation. Maybe the guy just got lost, fell into a ravine, find the body. The circus leaves, and my life goes back to normal. So, last night, I closed up shop, filled a cooler with water, grabbed the most powerful flashlight I own, and headed out in my truck. The official search was focused on a 10-mile radius around the guy's abandoned van. I went in the opposite direction, deeper into flats, directly toward the lights. The desert at night is a different world. The silence is so absolute it feels like a pressure on your eardrums. I drove for an hour, the 6 lights my only guide, a silent, celestial chandelier hanging in the infinite darkness. They seemed to hum with a quiet energy, a feeling that vibrated right in my teeth. I was on an old, forgotten service road when I saw it. One of the 6 lights, the one on the far right of the formation, seemed to detach. It didn't fall like a meteor, burning a bright, fast streak across the sky. It descended, a slow, controlled, silent glide downwards, as if it were being gently lowered on an invisible string. It dropped below the horizon, disappearing behind a low, flat-top mesa about a mile ahead. My heart started pounding. This was it. This was something. A deviation from the routine. I stomped on the gas, my truck kicking up a cloud of dust as I sped towards a mesa. This was the answer. A downed weather balloon, some experimental drone, a logical, physical object I could find and present a world. A solution. I parked my truck at the base of Mesa and got out, the powerful beam of my flashlight cutting a sharp, white tunnel through the darkness. The air was cold, and the silence was deeper here, more expectant. I scrambled up the loose rock of the mesa. On the other side was a small, shallow basin, and in the center of it, shimmering in the moonlight, was a pond. That was weird. There are no natural ponds out here. I walked closer. The air grew thick with a foul, chemical stench. I realized what it was. An old, abandoned mine had used this basin as a drainage pond decades ago. It was a pit of stagnant, polluted water. I swept my flashlight beam across the area. There was no orb, no wreckage, no strange lights. Nothing. Just a filthy, still water and the smell of industrial waste. A bitter wave of disappointment washed over me. Had I imagined it? Was I so desperate for this to be over that my mind was playing tricks on me? I walked to the edge of the pond, my boots sinking slightly in the damp, contaminated soil. I shone my light onto the surface of the water, hoping to see something submerged. The water was a thick, black, oily soup. It was so murky, so polluted, that the surface was barely reflective. But I could just make out my own silhouette, a dark shape cast by the powerful flashlight in my hand. I stood there for a long moment, ready to give up, to go home. And then I noticed it, in the faint, distorted reflection on the water's surface. My silhouette wasn't alone. There was another one right next to mine. It was the shape of a man, and it was under the surface. And it was moving. It was thrashing frantically, its limbs flailing in a silent, desperate panic. I watched, frozen in a state of pure, uncomprehending horror, as the silhouette beat its fist against the underside of the water's surface. It was like watching a man trapped behind a one-way mirror, a pane of glass separating his world from mine. He was pounding on the wall between us, screaming for help that I couldn't hear. My first thought was a missing man. Was it him? Trapped somehow? Was this some kind of bizarre projection? My mind, the mechanic's mind, was scrambling for a logical explanation and coming up with nothing but static. The sheer, naked terror of the thrashing silhouette was paralyzing. I felt a morbid, terrible urge to get closer, to understand what I was seeing. I knelt down at the water's edge, my flashlight beam still fixed on the two silhouettes. I leaned forward, my face just a few feet from the foul-smelling water. And as I did, my view of the reflection widened. I could now see the reflection of the night sky in the dark, oily water. I saw the stars, and I saw the lights. I counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. A jolt of pure, electric ice shot through my veins. I ripped my gaze from the reflection and looked up at the real sky. I counted again, my heart hammering against my ribs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were only 5 lights in the sky, but there were 6 in the reflection. I don't know what came over me. It wasn't courage. It was a kind of horrified, fatalistic curiosity. I had to know if it was real. I had to know if the surface was solid. I reached out a trembling hand, my fingers extended, and I touched the water. The second my fingertips broke the surface, the world ended. A force, an immense, impossibly strong, impossibly cold something wrapped around my wrist from inside the reflection. It was a vice grip of pure, malevolent energy, and it pulled. I screamed a raw, terrified sound that was swallowed by the vast desert silence. The pull was incredible. I was being dragged forward, off my knees, my face towards the filthy water. My mind flashed with an image of the thrashing silhouette, of being pulled through that dark, oily surface into whatever hellish, watery prison lay on the other side. Panic gave me a strength I didn't know I had. I dug my heels into the dirt, threw my entire body weight backward, and roared with effort and terror. For a horrifying second, there was a terrible, stretching, tearing sensation in my arm, as if I was being pulled apart, and then I was free. I flew backward, landing hard on the rocky ground, scrambling away from the water's edge like a terrified crab. I lay there gasping, clutching my wrist, which was numb and aching with profound, bone-deep cold. And then the pond began to glow. A soft white light emanated from beneath the surface, growing brighter and brighter, until the entire, filthy pond was a blazing, incandescent orb. The light was silent, but it felt loud, pressing in on me, scouring the landscape clean of all shadows. The surface of the water began to boil, but with a cold, silent energy. And then a perfect, massive sphere of pure, white light erupted from the water. It rose into the air, as silent and graceful as it had descended. It climbed higher and higher, a new star in the night sky, until it took its place in the formation, back in the empty spot on the far right. They were 6 again. I didn't wait. I scrambled back to my truck, my mind a blank slate of pure animal fear. I drove and I didn't look back. I'm home now. I'm safe. But I'm not. The horror isn't out there in the desert anymore. It's here. It's in my house. Because I understand now. They hide in reflections. Any reflection. I haven't been able to look in a mirror. I spent all of yesterday with a towel covering my bathroom mirror. I can't look at my own TV when it's turned off. The dark, reflective screen feels like a deep, black pond, and I'm terrified of what I might see looking back at me from just beneath the surface. A puddle on the street, a shop window, a reflection in a pair of sunglasses. They're all doorways. They're all potential prisons. The man who disappeared, he's not dead. He's not lost. He's taken. He's in there, in that watery reflection, thrashing against the other side. And maybe one day, the thing that took him will get bored and let another one out. I live in a world without mirrors now. A world where I have to be careful of every shiny surface. I almost got pulled in. I almost became another silent, screaming silhouette trapped behind the glass. And I can still feel the cold in my wrist where it touched me. A constant, chilling reminder that the world I thought was so logical, so full of cause and effect, has a dark, predatory reflection, and it is always waiting for you to get too close. Story 9. I retired and watched Wilshire split open, swallowing a bus hole. The street split open under me in mid-Wilshire. The day I retired, my captain told me I'd earned it. He was wrong. What I'd really earned was a wreck back, half a lung, and a pension that barely covers rent on a Koreatown one-bedroom, where the ceiling fan threatens to decapitate me every time the red line rattles underneath. So I drink burnt coffee, watch pigeons fight on the fire escape, and try not to replay the Wilcox fire. Spoiler, I fail. Every day. The flashover, the screaming, the radio static. The order I followed instead of trusting my gut. The half second that cost Emma's mother's life. Emma won't talk to me anymore. Can't say I blame her. Outside, LA did what LA always does. Honk, screeched Smog. The air was thicker today, carrying that metallic taste that meant the drilling crews were working overtime. 4 months now. The city's been punching holes deep into the earth, chasing geothermal energy like it was the answer to everything. The scientists promised it was safe. Same thing they said about the building codes before Northridge. That morning's plan was modest. Buy groceries, maybe call my sponsor, and finally fix the cabinet hinge in the kitchen that had been loose for 6 months. I stared at Dave's number. 2 months sober. But some days the bottle still called louder than common sense. Today was one of them. By the time I left, the drilling noise from the mid-Wilshire site had gotten worse. They'd been at it for weeks, tapping into something 6 miles down. The ground vibrated constantly, a low thrum that made my teeth ache. Mrs. Kim from downstairs stood by her jacaranda tree, frowning at cracks that had appeared overnight in the sidewalk. "Not good," she said, pointing. Her English was sparse, but her worry was clear. The corner market's radio was tuned to a call-in show. The host grilled one of the DWP engineers about the drilling project. The scientist kept insisting the borehole was stable, hitting temperatures right where they predicted. The host kept pushing. What happens if you hit something unexpected? The magma chamber is stable, the engineer said. We're nowhere near the active zones. Famous last words. I grabbed eggs, bread, and the cheap coffee I'd grown accustomed to. The kid at the register looked nervous, glancing out the window every few seconds. Even the pigeon seemed agitated, circling in tight, erratic patterns. Walking back, I felt the first real tremor, not the usual drilling vibration. This came from deeper, rolling up through the soles of my boots like the earth was clearing its throat. Mrs. Kim's tree swayed without wind. My coffee maker rattled across the counter when I got upstairs. Then came the sound, a deep groaning like metal under stress, but from everywhere at once. I'd heard that sound before, not from earthquakes, from structural failures, when a building decides it's done holding up, except this was the ground itself. The crack appeared with a sound like a rifle shot. A black seam split the asphalt outside my window, running straight down Wilshire toward the drilling site. Steam rose from the gap, not water vapor, something sharper, sulfur dioxide. I knew that smell from hazmat training. It meant volcanic activity. In Los Angeles, the delivery van went in first. Front wheel caught the edge as the crack widened, axle snapping, cab tilting nose down into the gap. The driver was trapped, screaming, while yellow steam poured out around him. I should have walked away. Not my job anymore. The department made that clear when they forced my retirement. Psychological unfitness for duty, they called it. What they meant was, Jack Morrison makes bad calls under pressure. But 20 years of running toward disaster don't just switch off. I grabbed my boots, the ones I swore I'd never need again, and hit the stairs. The crack was wider now, 3 feet across and growing. Heat rolled up from below, carrying the stench of sulfur and something else, something organic, burning. The van's cab dangled over the edge, metal shrieking with each tremor. One more jolt and the whole thing would drop. I could see the driver inside, hands frozen on the wheel, eyes wide with terror, just like Sarah Morrison had looked, trapped in that bedroom while the Wilcox fire ate through the floor beneath her. While I stood in the hallway, following orders instead of trusting what I knew. Not this time. I lunged to the van's door handle, hauled myself up onto the tilting frame. Heat blasted my face as I yanked the door open. The driver, young, maybe 25, wearing a wedding ring, stared at me like I was a hallucination. You can't spend it if you're dead. I grabbed his jacket, braced against the door frame, and pulled. We tumbled backward onto solid asphalt just as the van's front end gave way with a scream of tearing metal. The kid rolled away, coughing but alive. I lay flat, staring at gray sky, my lungs burning from sulfur. My heart hammered like I was 20 again. That's when I heard it. The roar, not from above, from below. A sound like a freight train bearing down, muffled by 6 miles of rock, but getting louder. The drilling had found something, all right, something that didn't want to stay buried. The eruption wasn't the Hollywood version. No graceful fountain of molten rock. This was violent. The street split wider with a sound like the world cracking open. Superheated gas blasted out, carrying chunks of debris that hit like shrapnel. A glowing mass of rock and metal, what used to be the van, shot skyward and crashed into a storefront. Ash began to fall. Real ash, volcanic ash, turning morning into dusk. It stung exposed skin and made every breath a struggle. The air tasted like metal and sulfur. Then I saw the city bus. It had stopped maybe 50 yards away. Passengers pressed against windows. Driver frozen at the wheel as a new crack raced toward his front tires. The ground under the bus was already sagging, asphalt turning soft from the heat below. 23 people on that bus. I counted them through the windows. Same number that died in the Wilcox fire, because I waited for orders instead of acting. My legs moved before my brain caught up. The bus driver was shouting into his radio, trying to back up, but the crack was too wide now. The front end tilted forward, hydraulics, screaming. A woman in scrubs, mid-20s, composed despite the chaos, was already pushing passengers toward the rear exit. Smart, but not fast enough. The bus was going down. I reached the front door as it tilted past the point of no return. Everybody out. Now! The voice that came out was the one I'd used for 20 years. The one that made people move without thinking. Back exit only. The nurse caught my eye through the glass. A moment of recognition. Two people who knew what they were doing in a world gone insane. She nodded and kept pushing passengers toward safety. The bus folded in half as I pulled the last person free. An elderly man who kept apologizing for being slow. It tumbled into the crack. Swallowed whole. Ash fell thicker now, and the roar from below grew constant. The drilling site had become a wound in the earth, vomiting fire and rock into the sky. Car alarms wailed. Windows shattered. Someone was screaming for help. Mrs. Kim stood by her broken tree, soot-covered, looking at me with something I hadn't seen in anyone's eyes for a long time. Trust. The nurse appeared at my elbow, hair gray with ash, stethoscope around her neck like a talisman. "What do we do?" she asked. Behind her, the survivors clustered together. The bus passengers, neighbors who'd run from their buildings, the van driver. 15, maybe 20 people, looking at me like I had answers, like I was still a firefighter. The truth was, I didn't know what came next. The ground was still splitting, still vomiting up the contents of the earth. No sirens yet, no help coming. Just us, just me. But for the first time since Wilcox, I wasn't paralyzed by the choice. Sarah Morrison was gone. These people weren't. "We move inland," I said, away from the drilling sites. "Find high ground and wait for rescue." The nurse nodded. "I'm Rebecca. I can handle medical." "Jack, I know evacuation." As if on cue, another section of street collapsed, taking out the corner market where I'd bought coffee an hour ago. The Korean owner ran toward us, clutching a cash register, looking stunned. Mrs. Kim barked at him in Korean, then looked at me. He asked if he knew the way. I glanced back at the growing fissure, the column of ash and fire climbing into what used to be a clear morning sky. Los Angeles was tearing itself apart, one street at a time. "Yeah," I said, surprised at myself with how steady my voice sounded. "I know the way." For the first time in 2 years, it wasn't a lie. Story 10. The diary I bought already knew my past. Now it's writing my future. I found the diary in a box at a yard sale. The woman running the stall had a smile that looked stapled on, stiff at the edges, as if she hadn't truly smiled in years. When I picked up the diary, she froze and stared at me. Then she whispered, almost breathless, $2. It was worn, bound in leather, with a brass clasp that no longer locked. The pages smelled faintly of mold and smoke, and they weren't empty. They were full. The handwriting was messy but steady, all scratched out in black ink. At first, I flipped through it casually, but then my stomach tightened, because it wasn't just anyone's diary. It was mine. It had everything. My scraped knees as a kid, my weird crushes in grade school, the time I stole $1 from my mother's purse and stuffed it into my sock, every thought I had kept private, every shame I never told a soul, written down. At first, I laughed nervously, convincing myself it had to be coincidence, some bizarre prank. But when I got home, something froze me to the core. The last page wasn't about my past. It was about now. August 28th, 10:47 p.m. He sits at the kitchen table, staring at these words, pretending he isn't afraid. He swallows hard, checks the front door, though he already locked it, twice. He doesn't know if he'll hear the scratching in exactly 3 minutes. The book slipped from my damp hands. I don't know why I did it, curiosity maybe, but I stayed there watching the clock, listening. At exactly 10:50, I heard it, a slow, deliberate scrape at the front door. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I told myself I imagined it. But when I opened the diary again, my blood turned to ice. August 29th, 8:02 a.m. He tells himself it isn't real. Tells himself he only imagined the sound. But if he listens carefully, he can still hear it. A faint scratching at the edge of his memory. He eats a piece of toast. He doesn't notice the shadow in the hallway. I snapped my head toward the hallway. Empty. But the feeling lingered. Something had been there, watching me. That night, I tried an experiment. I left the diary closed on my nightstand. When I woke up, it was open. A fresh entry filled the page. It described my dream, word for word. The one where my dead father sat on the edge of my bed and whispered in a voice like broken glass, "You can't shut it." The entries didn't stop. They no longer waited for me to open the book. The diary wrote itself. Sometimes the ink was still wet when I touched it, and then it went further. Not just recording, not just reflecting, predicting. August 31st, 6:44 p.m. He thinks he'll order takeout tonight. He won't. Instead, he'll cut his finger while chopping vegetables. The blood will drip into the sink in slow, deliberate beats, and he will stare at it for a very long time, hypnotized. I laughed, grabbed a knife, and started slicing onions, just to prove it wrong. The blade slipped. I watched a drop of blood swell at the tip of my finger, thick and red, before falling into the sink on September 1st. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to burn the damn thing. I carried it to the backyard, threw it into a metal trash can, and struck a match. But the second the flame touched the page, the words began to multiply. Ink bled across the paper like veins, racing faster and faster, filling line after line until the whole book trembled in my hands. The fire went out, cold, and there was a new entry. September 1st, 9:03 p.m. He tries to burn it. He can't. It writes faster when he's afraid. It feeds on him. He doesn't understand he will never destroy it. The more he resists, the stronger it becomes. I hurled it across the yard. It landed open on the grass, and the pages began to turn by themselves, as if invisible hands were rifling through them. The sound was like 100 whispers all at once. I ran inside and locked the door. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. The diary doesn't just predict anymore. It shows me things. Things that haven't happened yet, but will. Last night it wrote, September 2nd, 12:14 a.m. He won't hear the window slide open. He won't see the pale hand pulling back the curtain. He won't know she's already in the room until it's too late. I didn't sleep. I sat in the corner of my room, clutching a knife, staring at the window. Nothing happened. But this morning, when I opened the diary again, the entry had changed. September 2nd, 7:40 a.m. He sat in the corner all night with a knife. Thought it was enough. He didn't notice the footprints in the carpet leading to his bed. I looked. God help me, I looked. And they were there. Wet, pale footprints. Stopping inches from where I had been sitting. It's writing now, even as I hold it. The words are appearing while I write this to you. I can barely keep up. It's describing me, writing word for word, letter for letter, as if it's inside my head before my fingers even move. I don't know if posting this will help. Maybe if someone else reads it, it will break the cycle. Maybe then I'll finally be free. But the diary says otherwise. It says, September 2nd, 9:58 p.m. He thinks posting this will save him. He thinks someone out there will help. But all he's done is spread it. Every person who reads his words has already opened their own diary. They just haven't found it yet.